and welcome to a very special live episode of Your Next Favorite Movie. I am Josh G. I am here with my co-host for the day from the Jeff Needs Sports and Jeff Needs Help podcast. Please welcome Jeff Hunt.
Hey, everybody.
And our very, very special guest, because this is the 35th anniversary of Monster Squad, technically about 3 weeks away, but we're close enough. And please welcome Andre Gower to the show.
Thanks for having me. Hey, everybody.
All right.
I just got to tell you, Josh, I can't stop smiling. I can't stop smiling. All this came together. Anybody that's a podcaster knows how difficult this stuff can be and how much, and we appreciate, to get a great guest like this on. And when it all comes together, it's kind of a relief, but it's also a pleasure. So Andre, thanks again for doing this, man. I know I'm going to inundate you with questions and fan service and all that, but it's going to be a good time.
Totally fine. I'm well rested and I stretched a little bit before, so we should be good. Inundate away.
Awesome.
Right. So we'll start at the beginning. Of course, that is from everything I've heard. You were basically born into Hollywood. It sounds like that's the way it sounds to me. You were born into the business, right?
I guess kind of. It was, my sister is a few years older than I am, and she had been very active in the California pageant system up north, which was actually completely different than like pageants you see today. It's not toddlers and tiaras. It's like that's horrifying, absolutely horrifying. And someone had suggested that. To my mother that, she should be doing commercials and TV stuff. And apparently they said, well, which on-ramp is that? Let's go. And so they moved down to LA. And a few years after that, I was, surprise, here I come. So I was, apparently I have been told many times that I was a surprise, and I just keep on surprising. So surprise. And she worked a bunch, and when you're an infant and a toddler, I guess you're going everywhere that your family or your older sister goes, and I was just sort of around it, I believe, and I think I was just sort of next, if that makes sense. A lot of people ask, like, so what drove the decision to really get into acting? And I said, well, I was 5. And I was sitting in my office, and I was contemplating what I was going to do in my next career move. And, I was like, I did the whole toddler thing. So, now maybe it's like, let's be a professional actor. I don't think that's what happened.
Exactly. You're like, I've mastered the big wheel.
That's right. I'm on to 2 way before my peers. So let's go do business stuff. And I just think I was sort of around it. I was next. Apparently, I was comfortable with it. For the most part, and I think that has a lot to do with it, especially with kids. But look, let's be honest. When you're 5, you're usually not making all of the decisions. There are things being made for you, and you are being taken places and put in situations, whether that may be what you penciled in for your day or not. Because I was 5 and had my Palm Pilot, and was like scheduling my activities, of course. But I think it was a pencil and a crayon. And so I just started being around it and more active, and started doing a lot of commercials and TV spots and a lot of print work back then. There was a ton more printed material back in the 70s and early 80s than there is today, much to the chagrin of the trees. But, which I'm totally fine that there's not as much printage anymore. There was a lot of print work, a lot of brochures and catalogs and magazines and advertisements, and because there was no internet. So, you had to get it off the coffee table and off the newsstand. And so, my sister and I actually worked a lot together when we were very young. And then, I came, 8, 9, 10 years old, and I started actually working pretty regularly, in TV and film, and it just kept going and going. So, then you get into the teenage years, and it, becomes bonkers.
So I've always wondered this about, really young actors like yourself. Obviously by the time, everybody sees you in the Monster Squad, like you seem like a veteran actor. So, and you started so young, you don't, like you say, you don't really know a difference. Yeah. So I'm like, was there a point, like, I don't know how do you come to a revelation at a young age to where you're like, okay, I realize that, I mean, because you're a professional, like you're doing something professionally, you're helping somebody, you're working for a business. Is there a time you realize it, or is it just kind of like, this is what I do, and it's something you look back on 20 years later, like, wow, I was part of a corporation and it didn't hit me. I'm so curious about that.
I actually think it's a little bit of both, if that's a fair cheat answer. When you're young, you just know you're doing something that not everybody else is doing. You understand that. You understand it's work, it's a job. You've got, a lot of people think being a kid in the business or on a set is like just a giant adventure and like this fun game type thing. And you're like, you know what? Some of it can be fun. However, you are up against the 8 ball being the kid on a set because you are the hardest thing to deal with because of laws and regulations. And, the adults never want the kid to be the reason something goes wrong. And for punitive sake or penalty sake or time, because when you're working in TV or film, like time is your enemy. And sometimes if kids aren't ready, or if they aren't prepared, if you have a 6-year-old and has a just has a meltdown or something, which can happen, that's tough, and that happens a lot. So I think that's one of the things. I had a kind of temperate kind of attitude, or a temperate character, to where I could kind of focus and really understand what was going on and achieve what I was being asked to do. And that's really all you're doing when you're really young, Jeff. Like you're being shown something, told words to say, a position to stand in, and somewhat sort of cutesy way to do it. And really what you're doing is, at that time, you're mimicking the people that are telling you what to do. And so you bring your own kind of thing to it, and then you understand how to do it after a while, and you just go from there. Take for example, like Ashley Bank in the Monster Squad. She's 5 years old making a major motion picture, and she ends up being the hero of the movie.
Yeah,
with a lot of serious stuff to do, and some language and some stuff. Does she know everything that she's saying? No, she's 5.
Right.
Does she understand what she's trying to do and how to do it? Without a doubt. And Ashley was absolutely amazing,
incredible
on this set, because, and that's what usually kind of sets the kids apart from the other kids at any time in the industry. Back in my day when I was, 5 to 15, there was, a finite amount of kids in the business. There wasn't as much work either, and there wasn't as much work that was geared towards kids. This is before cable, before internet, before any of this stuff. So you had 3 networks, and then a 4th years later, some syndicated stuff and some movies. That was it. And, I think at any one time, I always say this. So if anybody's heard me on a podcast, this is, you're going to think you're being indoctrinated into a machine. But I see it as about 20% of the kids do 80% of the work, because that's the top of the list that knows what they're doing. They'll get cast. They look the right way. They act the right way, and they can handle the job. And if you kind of look back, you kind of see that, because there's a ton of kids that you grow up with in the industry that never do anything. They're always around in auditions. They just never get it for some reason. Or once in a while they get 1 or 2 things, and that's just how it goes. I feel fortunate enough that I was probably part of that 20% that got to do, more than one thing. But yeah, and then as you grow up a little bit, you kind of understand a little bit deeper what's going on. But I also was very fortunate because I had a blend of both worlds. And that was a big focus of myself and my parents and everybody around that knew me. So when I wasn't working, so when you're working, you're out of, if it's school time, you have to go to school every day on the set. It's a state law. And you have to have a certain amount of hours each day. There's a teacher on set that is also your professional advocate, like making sure you're not being put into like, a lava pit or a raging river or something, or, getting thrown off a building. And, it's very regimented. But I also had when I wasn't working, I would be in my regular school, which I loved. All my schools. I loved every school I went to, except for one. I loved every school I went to. And that was only for a very short amount of time. I wanted to love it. It just didn't want to love me back. And, you know, I played sports on the side. I had friends that were not in the industry. And so I had this very kind of, talk about foot in two different ponds. Jeff, was, you know, before we started recording, it was, you know, this is the ultimate foot in two different ponds. I had an industry, you know, existence and a non-industry existence, but that was also very important to balance out who you were and how you learned things. And I think they both helped each other because school, I'm one of those weird kids that said, I loved school. Everybody hated school. Usually kids hated school because it was boring and they didn't do well. I loved school because I loved being around my friends and I loved learning shit. And, you know, sometimes you didn't want to go to school, maybe retired, but I enjoyed it. I loved, you know, playing with my friends during lunchtime. I loved learning stuff. I had great teachers. I liked to read, which is very rare, you know, with kids. And, you know, I could process all of that. I could absorb it and I could use it. And like I said, I think those two disparate worlds actually reinforced each other, if that makes sense. And I feel very fortunate that I don't think a lot of us got that.
Yeah, it totally does. And this is what I've thought about a lot, you know, through all this, because, you know, you listen to all this and I think about, and I think a lot of it's because, you know, we're basically the same age. And I remember the point in time and it was a different, it feels like a different planet. And like, if like 1980 feels like a different planet than we live on now. But I think that comes through a lot. And that's why this movie connects so much to me, you know, as 12-year-old, when I see this movie, is because it feels so authentic. Like, I know these guys are actors, but it really feels like you lived in the same world I do. Like I mean, you know, everything about it. I'm like, that's me and my friends. Like, we're riding the bikes, we're doing this. Some of my favorite stuff about the movie is like, no, we got to leave the adults out of this. They're just going to screw this up. And that really hit home, but it comes across. And like, you know, the way you drum up the intensity in that role with that age, it stood the test of time. But that makes sense because you were in that world too. You know, you weren't just you weren't sheltered from that. You know, you were allowed to live in that world, and then it feels like it carried over to the set. That makes a lot of sense.
I'm sure, and that's even more of a kind of, you know, drilled down example of actually being in a story that's in Anytown, USA at a certain time in, you know, history. Whereas, you know, I wasn't a 13-year-old trying to play a kid running around Europe during World War I. I have no idea what that would be like. I wouldn't want to. That would be awful. But yeah, riding the bikes, you know, going around the neighborhood, you know, dealing with monsters, you know, dealing with parents. There was a lot of stuff going on that was very, very current. And that's what I think that those undertones of what was going on, either on the bikes or in the treehouse or, you know, in the parents' living room. You know, a lot of kids related to all of that. And that's what I think was really different about Monster Squad, and what Shane and Fred had on the page connected. And I don't think it was necessarily intentional. It was just what was real at the time. And, you know, that kind of jives with, you know, over the years, everybody asked me to, you know, kind of distill down why Monster Squad has that, you know, connection and that ability to last. It's because it's the heart and authenticity of the characters and the story, what they were doing. But look, it's a bunch of, we're fighting monsters that don't exist. They're supernatural with magic powers. It's like completely fantasy.
Right.
And yet everybody says that was us. That was real. That could have been us. We wanted to do that. And I think it's the archetypes of the adventure and the characters and everything that everybody wants to be one part of a cool group of friends that, you know, have each other's backs or understand each other. And whether it's just sitting around reading comic books or sitting around, you know, talking about Robotech, when, you know, 5 kids in your entire school know what the hell it is, you know, that's okay. Or, you know, going out in the woods and building, you know, everybody connects to something different. And I think that's what happens in Monster Squad. And it's fascinating to see over the years that get reinforced and people, you know, just say that's exactly what it was.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's, you know, it spanned the test. Like you know, immediately, as soon as my son was old enough to not say like old enough to like, you know, legally watch it or whatever, like old enough to remember it, first Halloween show I showed him. My nephews was the same way. It's like, it's a generational thing that like, that's just like one of the first things. I've got a grandson on the way within the next 7 days. And I will promise you that as soon as can be, Monster Squad is going to be like, it's everything you said. It's so authentic. It stands the test of time. It's a time capsule. It's really a time capsule. I'm sorry, Josh. I didn't mean to hijack the show. I told you I was going to be a bit to handle today.
Well, actually, I wanted to jump back a little bit to something you said. You were talking about how as a kid, basically, in a way, you were being dragged to these things to do. At what age do you think you started to make the decision and what you wanted to go for as far as parts wise?
40
roles. Oh no, 40.
I only say that because I know Dorothy's not listening. And Dorothy is my mother. And no, again, like, she was great. She was really really kind of the driving force / factor, behind all of this. But was also, right there and making sure nothing went askew, and might have been a little bubblish, little protective, but after the, you're like, that's okay. That probably worked out, better for everybody. I think you don't really get this unless you're really, look, I talk about the 20% of kids or people in the business that work. Unless you're that 1%, you're not choosing or picking stuff per se. However, I was very fortunate enough. I got to the point in a career where you would get, the chance to skip the original auditions. You would get straight offers. You would get, or go straight to network or straight to producers. If anybody knows kind of the timeline of a casting process, there's two or three preliminary steps, and then like maybe 1 or 2 final steps. And for a number of years in my teenage years, I just went straight to the final 1 or 2. Kind of casting steps. And then there's also these things where you actually just get, you do that and then you get offered multiple things, which is, that's the brass ring, right? That's, if you're getting cast in multiple things, you're like, now you get to choose which ones you can do or want to do. Sometimes it's scheduling, sometimes it's contractual. You can't do, I missed out on more than one thing because I was contractually stuck in something else that may or may not have even be happening, but I was unable to do other things that I'd be offered due to that contract. And those are big examples. But all of us, we all have, it's not just me, we all have some like, I couldn't get to do that movie or that show, or like, and I have a few, and we all do. And those are great stories to trade, when you get together and say how great everybody looks when you haven't seen them in 10 years or so. But, when I was a teenager coming out of Monster Squad, I had and I understand and appreciate the hell out of this because I had a very unique television career leading up to Monster Squad, because I had the fortune to be, I don't want to say discovered, but kind of brought into the world of people like Michael Zenberg and Randy Zisk. Michael Zenberg was this already big, TV executive that had worked on big shows in the 70s and 80s. Randy Zisk was a new executive that was coming in on network television shows. And I got cast in a show called Fathers and Sons. And it was a very cool concept. It was about 4 boys and their fathers and the relationships with them. It was a big network show. And I had already done a couple sitcoms. I already done some guests, I'd done series leading up to this, but this was sort of that paradigm shift in a career when you're 13 or 12. And it got to the point where I was doing a bunch of shows off the 20th Century Fox lot because of Zenberg and Zisk. They were developing shows that I was going to be in or potentially be the lead in. And that's just how Hollywood goes. But I did a number of shows, with this same group. And that translated into great things because had Old Break got cast in the Monster Squad. And then coming out of Monster Squad, Fox becomes the 4th network. And because I was doing these shows, I had a relationship with the studio, with the things. So it was sort of in-house. And, Fox originally had 6 or 7 shows. And I got offered 2 of them, and I had to choose, or we had to choose. And, I ended up choosing Mr. President because it was Johnny Carson's production company. Ed Weinberger was the producer, and it was starring George C. Scott. Coming out. So what show are you going? And it was guaranteed to go 2 seasons, and they were paying above scale, and that was the no-brainer decision at the time. Of course, the other show that I didn't take ended up, going for much longer, becoming a worldwide phenomenon for 10 or 12 years. But leading up to that, these shows that I've been doing off the Fox lot, one was called Heart of the City, and it had 3 kids in it, and one was the son and daughter of the detective. It was a cop show, and one was a criminal, and I got to play the criminal. And the 3 kids on this show were myself, Jonathan Ward, and Christina Applegate.
Oh, geez. And
this show only went 1 or 2 seasons. I was a recurring character. He arrests me in the pilot because I'm a 12-year-old crack dealer, and I shoot a kid in the first episode. And
I am in on this show.
Super 80s. Well, a little ahead of its time, a little dark. And I think it needed to actually be darker, and then it would have caught a little bit. But those 3 kids coming off of that cop show ended up on 3 shows on the new network, 2 years later. And it's all because of that connection going back 3-4 years prior to that, and then coming out of Monster Squad. And then, so, when Monster Squad comes out and bombs at the box office, I had already been, contracted and cast in a brand new TV show on the new network starring George C. Scott for 2 seasons. So, the impact of a movie failing seemed to not be a factor. And sometimes it's a different story. Who knows? I mean, if Monster Squad had been different and I'd done these 2 seasons, who knows what would have happened? We probably would have done Monster Squad 2 and we fight Godzilla. But it's a different or Godzilla. Actually, I always
I'm just upset that I didn't get that movie.
I always wanted, when we talked about the Godzilla thing, I always said, why can't Godzilla be our friend? And like we fight invaders or something. Like Godzilla's a good guy.
Goodness.
Godzilla's not a bad dude. He didn't ask to be Godzilla.
No, he's misunderstood.
He's misunderstood. No one
just like Jaws.
Choose to be a radiator.
No, we're not.
I'm
down that
Jeff,
road.
did you just say like Jaws?
Yeah, I'm a Jaws defender.
Jeff, have you need to? There's a podcast called The Daily Jaws that I did, and it's one of my favorite things I did because I deep dove, pun intended, on some Jaws shit, and I defend Jaws as the character.
Yeah, take that, Josh. I literally
Jeff is a Jaws the Revenge defender. Let's clear this up.
Hey, I always said this. The last thing we'll say for, because I've got Josh sidetracked on this way too many times over the years. I'm just saying the Brody family could have left the shark alone. Just leave him alone. Like
they went to the Bahamas. They went to the Bahamas and it followed them. Come on, Jeff. All right.
Hey, the shark is just sharking. He's just being a shark. He knows nothing else but to be a shark, and we don't like that.
This is my greatest
it's very human
podcasting.
It's a very human. It's a very shitty human story. It's like, we're just humans. We don't like this. We're going to kill you.
Yeah.
Not in the Revenge. That's not the story in the Revenge.
I know. I get it. We're talking about the original. Anyway,
there you go. I'm sorry.
But anyway, going back to the day, Josh, I think you had a question. I don't know if I answered. I started going off a tangent on backstory. But, those are times that, I got fortunate enough to be offered multiple things and you get to choose. And, whether after the fact it's the right choice or the wrong choice, that's up to history to decide.
Well, I think what's it's amazing about it, and I forget about this until every time I start the movie, I'm like, I know you weren't 12 when the movie came out. You were 12 when you filmed Monster Squad, correct?
I was 13 when we shot it. It came out.
Okay,
I turned
13.
14 when we shot it. Yeah.
You're the top billed actor in a major motion picture at 13. That's amazing. I mean, that is like, that's immortal stuff right there. Every time I see it, I'm like, a lot of times they'll even just not do that because like, I don't know, they would have, I apologize. Like they might've put, Mary Ellen as the top bill just because, or whatever, or
Duncan Regeer, who had been in more stuff, or different things.
Exactly. But no, it's right there, and I'm like, that is things that people just don't reach that point of the mountain. You know what I mean? Like you start getting into that 1 percentile right there. And then to have these conversations about, I mean, I would say every actor, I don't care what they did their entire career, how successful. There's so many what ifs because it's just,
Okay.
what they call sliding doors. Like it is just like this could have been this could have been this. I don't care if you're Tom Cruise. I don't care if you're somebody that had one commercial when you were 3. The what ifs have to just they just have to mount up. But you have seemed to, you seem like a fully functional, like adult, rational, that has lived this life and came out the other side and recognized what it was, rather than, we don't always see it turn out this way.
Well, you would think. I discovered I'm actually wearing no pants and I have big giant clown shoes on right now. So, the unbalanced, like, actually, that'd be pretty funny. Yeah, but what you mentioned there, I think that's actually two. It's more than one thing that you mentioned there, Jeff.
I know, I have that problem.
The first card thing, yeah, pretty cool. It doesn't matter if you're trying to be, smooth about it or whatever. That's Paul Newman's first card.
100%.
That's some cool stuff. So, and I don't know who else really character-wise would have been. So I don't know if it was just by default. I don't know if it was me. But yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty cool. It really is. And going forward, of being balanced or halfway rational or sane, whatever we were talking about there. I'm not going to show you the giant clown shoes, but I think that has to do a lot with having a balanced world and life, of having, I don't want to call it the normal world. I don't want to call it the real world, because, Hollywood's fake. It's not, it's just a different, I lived in 2 parallel universes that didn't really cross over, and they kind of just went, together. And every once, depends on, which way you lean and where you're at. And I think having a concerted effort on my part, because it was very important to me, and it became very important to my parents and everybody else around that knew me, that was an important thing. I can count on, I need more hands to count on a lot of my friends that I grew up with in the industry that are still good friends of mine that have not done anything else. They don't know anything else. They can't do anything else. Or if they do, it's kind of, it's not, they're not making it happen for themselves. It's like, the well-roundedness, I think that growing up in the industry was not the dominant force. It was a major part, or a major component of multiple components as I was growing up, that balanced me out or gave me a foundation to kind of, be an idiot on later. and do a bunch of random stuff that means nothing. But it's all about experiences. It's all about experiences.
Okay, so I have a question with the casting, because I know you've said it over and over. You went for Rudy. They called you back and gave you Sean. What I want to know, were you going for Rudy because that's the kind of kid you were, or is that the kind of kid you wanted to be? Because as a child watching this movie for the first time, Rudy was the coolest, most badass dude I'd ever seen.
I was a Sean. 100%.
No, when I was a kid, I was like 8.
I had the barber cut my hair like Sean.
Okay.
Oh, sorry.
I wanted to be Sean. You're not wrong, but I was all in. I was like, I want to look like this guy.
Yeah,
I didn't do that. When he rides up on that bike and lights that match, I was like, watching now, it's like
what a great
wearing. I'm like, what
character.
But as a kid, man, that was awesome. What were you hoping?
If we're comparing, and then I'll get into the actual kind of,
okay,
stroke by stroke of what happened. I was a little bit of both. I always had my own kind of style. I liked different eras. I always had great hair with a lot of hair product. Now I just have medium hair product and not a lot of great hair, or less great hair. It's bad. Getting old sucks, but or getting older sucks. And really what it is, it kind of ties into what I was mentioning before, my body of work and TV leading up to that. Because you asked what kind of kid was I? And it really wasn't me. It was about the body of work leading up to that. And that's what kind of affects the auditions or the submissions or the requests. And that show, Fathers and Sons, I was, out of the 4 kids, I was the cool kid. Leather jacket, jelly hair, cool clothes, like Hawaiian silk shirts. And like, they actually went into the 20th Century Fox wardrobe department and pulled stuff from the 50s for me to wear in that show. And because really what was awesome about the show, what happened that ended up making the show not happen, like we did the pilot. This is a big NBC show called Fathers and Sons, about 4 kids. Honestly, it's just a Monster Squad group of kids. It's the, you know, fun, maybe a little overweight kid, the leader, cool, you know, a dorky kid that's really smart, and the cool kid, you know, his name was Sean, ironically in this show too. And we all had our relationships with our fathers, and like, you know, the big redheaded kid's dad was the coach. The, you know, kind of the more what we would call the nerdy kid's dad was a doctor. The other kid's dad was a cop, and my dad was the absent father, skirt chasing, divorced parents story. And that had a lot to do with storylines. The problem we do this pilot, and one of the reasons the show was great is because it had Merlin Olsen.
Oh my
From,
goodness.
you know, the NFL and Little House on the Prairie and Father Murphy coming in to lead another network show. It had Nicholas Guest, who was the dad of Ian, the kind of nerd, the nerdier kid, and my dad was Ricky Nelson, returning to television from Ozzie and Harriet, and being, you know, a worldwide rock and roll heartthrob. And so Ricky Nelson was coming back to television. It was a huge deal, and we do the pilot. It gets picked up for 5 episodes as an end of the season kind of plug-in, and then if those episodes go well, they'll pick it up for a full run for the next season. And that's how television worked back then. So we do the pilot. Network likes it. It turns out okay. They air it. Like, everybody's like, ooh, like Merlin Olsen, Ricky Nelson, that awesome kid Andre Gower in the show. No, and it gets picked up for these 5 episodes. In between that pickup and starting shooting those 5 episodes, Ricky Nelson dies in a plane crash. And he dies, and so does the show, because that's kind of the star power. And so we do the 5 more episodes, and it just doesn't get picked up for the run because it doesn't have that. And that's what Names and Faces will, you know, do, you know, for shows. But I was the cool kid on that. And then also in that show, Heart of the City, the cop show, ironically, playing the criminal, spiky hair, leather jacket, running around in camouflage pants in downtown LA and like getting chased by the cops. You know, that was, you know, kind of the badass. I was a little badass, you know, but you know, it was cool. And so automatically, you know, with your headshots of the time and your body of work leading up to this, you know, random casting thing for some movie with monsters in it, and your agent's going to, you know, submit you for these roles. And I went and screen tested. I went audition, screen test, callback, all for Rudy. Never auditioned for Sean Crenshaw. And I know why I didn't get Sean Crenshaw. Because Ryan Lambert went in there and murdered it and became Rudy. He became Rudy.
Yeah, there's no other Rudy. Like, I mean, I've heard you say that. And
could I have been Rudy? Sure, I would have had the hair.
Absolutely.
It would have been a little campier, laid back Rudy. Ryan brings this whole other thing just with his physical look, but also, you know, he talks about it later. It's great. You know, Rudy has a little bit more vulnerability than just he's not the badass. He's a little vulnerable badass. Like, he needs to be part of this as well. It's fascinating. And we all end up in the correct places. And so but somebody, I always, you know, I actually talked with Fred about this on a podcast a couple of weeks ago. I was like, it's been 35 years and I don't know of the group of people, which is probably 4 to 6 individuals, when they're deciding on who the lead of this movie is going to be. I never auditioned for it, so they're not thinking of me for that.
Yeah.
And, you know, somebody said, what about that kid we read as Rudy? Could we wash the gel out of his hair? Could we give him a bad haircut? Sorry, Jeff. Give him a bad haircut. You know, put him in some clothes that don't fit great. And could he be the, you know, kind of, you know, bossy around, you know, kind of gang leader?
Yeah.
You know, squad lead. And they all apparently said, yeah. And you know, if Fred believed, I think it was Peter Hyams, maybe. So, you know, thank you, Peter. But it's also thank you to everybody else: Shane, Fred, Peter, Penny Perry, the casting director. You know, all these people went, yeah, that's it. That's the answer. Didn't call me in for a meeting. Didn't audition for it. Just straight cast me as Sean. And that's And obviously, when I get the call, it's like I was depressed. I was disappointed because we all wanted to be Rudy, and I was closer to anybody in the world of being Rudy, and but it just didn't work. And I was a little disappointed because it was like, no, Rudy's the cool character. He gets to kill more of the monsters. He does the scene because the audition scene was the pull up on the bike. That was the main audition scene, and the scene in the treehouse talking to Patrick's sister, which is always awkward, sitting in a room full of adults asking a teenage girl if she's a virgin or not, and try to be cool about it while you're drinking a beer in a treehouse, and it all worked out. It all worked out exactly the way it's supposed to.
My guess is that just by watching the performance then, and just just seeing you through the years and listening to the interviews, my guess is that they were probably just watching you interact with other people, because it jumps off the screen what a natural leader you were. Everybody, like, it makes so much sense. Like, everything you say. My favorite scene is when you've decoded the message off the phone, you're in the treehouse, everybody's goofing around, and you finally are just like, lay down the law. But I mean, it is really a great scene, and it is genuine how everybody just and it makes sense why you're a point guard. Like, I totally get, like, I'm like, well, of course he was a point guard, you know what I mean? So my guess is that, like, everybody's just watching you interact with the adults, with the other actors and everybody, and they're like, this kid's there's just something. I would imagine it's been like that your whole life. You probably go into a group, whatever it is. It could be a golf outing, and everybody's like, okay, you're in charge. Like, you just feel like someone that they're probably like, you're in charge, because it just jumps off the screen. And I think, honestly, that's the one ingredient that makes the movie work like it does.
Well, I appreciate that. Not a lot of people, they touch on that a little bit, but they don't go as deep, or probably where it really is as you did, Jeff. And I think it's what's great about cool podcasts when it work out like this is things kind of come back on themselves and it was that balanced world, having experiences in different things instead of just faking it.
Yeah,
because acting is pretend. You've either got to pretend to be a space alien, you've got to pretend to be a fighter pilot, or you've got to pretend, to be, a soldier in World War I. Like, but no one knows what that's like. I don't know what it's like to fight supernatural creatures, in a swampy Anytown, USA. But I do know what it's like to interact with a group of friends. I do know what it's like to sort of be the one that's looked to kind of lead the charge, so to speak. Because I grew up playing sports. That's a team thing. I played individual sports too, but you play baseball and soccer and basketball, and these are all things where you have coaches and you have team captains and you have MVPs and you have coaches award winners and things like that. And there's no way that all of that doesn't permeate into it all. And I've always understood that. I just let other people say it.
Well, that's the definition of the leader. You know what I mean? It's about what I do. You know what I mean? It's like, but you like, and it's part of it's the writing too. It's so well written. I mean, if you look at Shane's career, like, obviously he writes these dominant characters, like, in these movies, and it's weird that it even comes through for a 13-year-old character. Like, it still comes through of like this this take charge, action first, kind of character. And it's without a doubt my favorite part of it. All right, Josh, I'm sorry again. I'll be quiet for like 10 minutes.
Well, piggybacking off that, I just will say, for Shane Black, the only thing that's missing is Christmas, right? Like,
that's right.
Go to now.
Right.
Yeah.
All his movies have Christmas in them somewhere.
Yeah, they do, which I don't, that I think that started, it started with Lethal Weapon and never stopped.
Exactly. Which, same year as this. Lethal Weapon comes out. So.
Yeah, actually, Lethal Weapon got greenlit while we were making Monster Squad. And so that was a big deal. And, we never knew this, kind of cool, really smart, funny, weird dude with glasses that was the co-writer of this movie that was on set, for 3.5 months with us, is going to end up being, the biggest screenwriter in Hollywood.
A juggernaut. Yeah, especially
right.
for like people like me that like really enjoy his movies. Like,
yeah, and when early proto Shane stuff, or been around him, or read those early scripts. Like, I remember reading the script to The Last Boy Scout before they made it. I don't know why I read. I think he gave it to me, or I got to read it. And the movie's completely. That's the problem with writing. Is you read something and you're like, oh, I'm making this movie in my mind, and then someone else makes it, and you're like, nah.
Yeah.
And that happens. And what's funny with Shane Black, and I'm not speaking for Shane, I'm speaking as an observer of what went on, and during the early '90s, and Shane comes out of Monster Squad, comes out of Lethal Weapon, ends up leaving the franchise because of they're like tweaking the characters in a way that he's like, this is not what this guy is, and ended up not liking how things go studio wise in Hollywood, and but then turns around and rips out the two highest paid spec screenplays in the history of the industry back to back, and is just this rock star of these movies that come out. And then people don't like the movies are still okay, they're just like not as good as they could have been. Maybe different director, maybe different cat, whatever it is. Look, I think Bruce Willis and Damon Wayans is not a bad cast. Is Samuel L. Jackson and Gina Davis a bad kid? No, not at all. And they were very du jour, right? They were very names du jour.
Yes.
And that's what movies are. That's how they get made. I just, it's always little tweaks. It's production design, it's costuming, it's rewrites, it's how a director cuts something, or an editor finishes something, and and then he goes on this big hiatus and comes out with what I think is his best movie, is the one that wasn't going to get done ever, and it's his comeback, and he's like, but I'm not letting anybody else direct my shit. Like, I'm directing this one. And there's a whole backstory with that one, but he ends up doing it, and they're like, yeah, no, that's not going to happen. And they're like, well, then we're not making this. And he's like, oh, and by the way, I've written the two main characters for two specific actors. And they're like, well, who are these actors? And he tells them, and they're like, this is never going to happen. Then think back, this is early 2000s with Val Kilmer and Robert Downey Jr.
Yeah.
Neither one of these guys is insurable and ever working again, ever.
Nope. Yeah, this is really the start of the comeback for RDJ, at least. Kiss, kiss, bang, bang.
I think RDJ owes Shane Black Iron Man money, because, and I think they do. I mean, they end up, doing other things, but I think that's why Shane gets to write and direct Iron Man 3. But yeah, I mean, comes back, and I think look, Kiss, Kiss, Bang, Bang is my favorite Shane Black movie because he wrote it and directed it. I love The Nice Guys, but you have to watch it at least twice, sometimes 2.5 times to catch everything.
It's a slow burn. It's a slow burn.
It's a slow burn, but there's some little tweaks in there that I think Gosling and Crowe are absolutely great with.
Absolutely.
But yeah, and then he resurrects 2 careers, or 3, including himself. And then, I just think it's a neat story to be, kind of tangentially connected to cool shit like that.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you're like I say, we're talking about a movie this movie is immortal. Like, you're connected to, like, it's beyond cool. Like, it really, it stands the test of time. It'll never go away. It's just wonderful.
It may not. I mean, it's 35th. This is crazy. And
it holds up. It really holds up.
It does.
I don't know when Josh is planning on getting into the documentary, because
I still have some other questions I want to ask. But
I know
we're getting there. We're getting there.
Okay,
we're getting there.
Okay. But anyway, I can't wait. Sorry, Josh.
No, it does. Actually, before Josh gets into his next thing, Jeff, you touched on some stuff that, and I mentioned the stuff that Fred and Shane put on the page, unintentional or intentional. I think it's mostly unintentional, that connected with the kids that watch this movie. Also are they're archetypal, and they are Carl Jungian in nature, and that's why it can still linger and work today. Some of the wardrobe, some of the dialogue, some of the interaction, is is dated.
Yeah.
But what connects with like the second generation, you get ready to show your grandkid, now that's third generation Monster Squad fan, interaction, because the basic archetypes and the characters in the story, those are human archetypes. And when you read about that and you read about Jung, Carl Jung and things like, you're like, oh, these all okay, this is why Star Wars, the first one, works. It's very basic. It's good, evil, it's black, it's white, not race, it's black, it's white, it's the colors, it's the coming together, it's good versus evil, it's people banding together and underdog circumstances. Like everybody reacts to the same stuff on a visceral human mental level.
Yeah, that's what
and Monster Squad, a lot of things, a lot of kids movies, a lot of kids groups movies, even from the 70s, which were even campier and more awful. But when you get into the 70s, these are all written usually by 45 or 50-year-old white dudes that haven't been a kid in 40 years, that have no idea what's going on. And like, well, what are the kids saying today? Let's write, did they say G. Willikers still? Yeah, I think that's pretty cool. That could be pressing the envelope. We might get an R rating if we say gollywags. And that's my like old guy in the 80s, who was a kid in the 30s. In case you didn't get the impression.
Very correct. That holds up.
I still think they said the same bad words, though. But the thing that I always, emphasize is Fred and Shane just got out of being kids themselves, and that's what makes it work. That's why it works. That's it. That's the secret. Everybody's like, "Why? I don't understand." It's like, it's very simple. The secret sauce is Fred and Shane were kids just a few years young before. As they were writing, they're in college writing this story.
Yeah, and they didn't write it as like what we think kids would talk like again, as somebody in that world, it is like, and I understand the problematic stuff that comes up a lot. I get it.
Yeah.
But also that was still part of our world. Like that was a snippet of the world that, things have changed obviously and some things have gotten better, but that was just a cross section of our world. That's what it was like. That's what it felt like. That's what it looked like. But I think the other side of, there's a lot of stuff in the movie that's way more inclusive that they don't give it credit for. Like, I think Rudy was very like, he could have been very judgmental of the team. He wanted in the team. It wasn't like they weren't begging him. Like, first of all, the huddle is just great. Huddle. Like, I mean, huddle, but the huddle's like, move 6 inches closer.
That's right.
Beside this. But like, Rudy wanted in the team. You know what I mean? He wasn't like, he didn't have to be drug into it because he was a cool kid. He wanted to be, and he automatically defended his friends that were in the team. Horace is one of the just great characters ever written, for a movie, period. You've talked about that a lot. So I think that as we talk about I don't want to call it problematic stuff, but obviously the stuff that stands out that is different than now, we also got to talk about, like, it was a little ahead of its time as far as it treated kids my age like we were mature enough to handle it. Like, this is what we're really talking about. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know how to explain what it was like to be a 12 or 13-year-old and your friends that had older sisters, but this is exactly what it was like. I mean, it really is just it's a time capsule. So
it is. And not that I don't ever feel like I have to defend, because I didn't write the movie. I didn't write the movie. I was in it. But when people bring up stuff that could be problematic today, yes, it's problematic today. Like I said, these are snapshots of an era. It had heart and authenticity, and that's why everybody connected with it. But if you have to do that, if you have to defend the problematic stuff, it's very, very easy with the counterbalance to what is there of how we treat each other.
Yes.
How we bring in other people, how we actually, even though we're saying words to our best friends, they're not pejoratives. Even with, the character's name is Fat Kid on the page. It says Fat Kid on the page. That's his name. And we call him Fat Kid. We're the only ones that are allowed to do that. Why? Because we're his crew.
Yes.
He's ours. We are his. And I'm sure, they could sit around and call Sean, unsufferable know-it-all or, bossy bastard. but also Horace is Horace. I don't ever compare Monster Squad to Goonies that much because they're completely different, but there's very almost character for character
we get it.
examples here, right? And with Chunk and Goonies, we never make fun of Horace.
No.
The Goonies crew makes fun of Chunk constantly. He is the source of their ridicule constantly. They make him dance to come in the yard. I mean, it's like, this is not, we don't do that. And we don't care. And I think it's almost like we own it. Like we call it, but we own it because it's out. He's ours. We own it. When he owns it. Like we call him that and he doesn't care. He only cares when someone doesn't love him and says, "My name is Horace." Rudy is different because he needs to be involved in something. And I think all of the Ryan, for years, the glasses, the hair, the leather jacket, the attitude, that's all armor. That's all armor for a vulnerable kid. And that's all a facade. And he needs to belong to something for that to come, for what's under that to come out and be who Rudy is. And then another counterbalance is we're a little ahead of the time, very Shane Blackish. The hero of the movie is the young girl.
Yeah.
We'd all be dead if it wasn't for Phoebe.
Yeah.
And, that kind of, keeps going on in Shane characters where there's always a young protagonist that is the hero. And a lot of times it's the young girl. And how great is that? So anytime you want to bring up the stuff that's uncomfortable today, great. We can sit around and talk about it. But there's also a bunch of counters.
A ton of just
like that no other movies have.
No, the movies just got such a big heart and a bond, and that's why the fans bond too.
Yeah, and that's that was a dynamic that we were unaware of because the movie bombed. For 19 and a half years or whatever, we didn't know people gave a shit about this movie. I would go around, I knew some people that seen it or had it or, would run into you. Cause I was sort of out, all through the 90s, I was out of that world. I went to college, I went to college for different things. I went to college in different areas that had no connection to LA or to Hollywood. Couldn't get further. I mean, it couldn't get more rural, further away, small town, in kind of, both the towns I went to college in. But, and that was okay. But you'd run into every once in a while. Oh, I know that. I love that movie. It's great. Sometimes it's, it gets a little much, but it wasn't all that. And then 2006 rolled around and realized that there was a gigantic legion of Monster Squad fans that had finally been able to come together over the last couple of years because of the internet.
Yep.
And then we have this screening that just launches this resurgence that we thought was really, really cool and would last about 6 months.
Okay, so I'm gonna address this to both of you because you were the age in the 80s as well, Jeff. We talked about the dialogue. Nards. I learned Nards from this movie. Was that a saying at the time?
Nope, I got it from this movie.
Okay.
It might have been.
I could be wrong. I think everybody got it from this movie because I had never heard it before.
Nope.
Jeff, where did you grow up?
Central Ohio.
Central Ohio. Okay. I'm getting ready to go to Ohio in a couple of weeks. So, and this is a great story because I read the script and we're getting ready to do, I actually say Nards first in the movie. I don't have the great line. Brent has the great line.
No, I
have Kick Him in the Nards, which is pretty cool. But Wolfman's got Nards.
And again, this is where you were so committed. Like you were so committed. Like you were confident that kicking him in the Nards would work. I love the commitment in that scene.
Hey, someone's got to make a leadership call in the heat of something.
It is perfect. He says, "What?" And you don't.
When all else fails,
you don't hesitate. You're like, kick him in the Nards.
When all else fails. But what I love about that is. I didn't realize until decades later that I was learning something. And I only realized I learned something from a story that Ryan realized years later that he told about himself. And it's a little, people have heard it, but it helps with the backstory. Like Ryan is with the costumer working on Rudy's wardrobe. And she has 6 or 7 leather jackets. And like the third or fourth one he puts on, And she goes, "Oh, I think that's it. That's the one. That's the one." And Ryan's like, "I don't know. I don't like this one. Like, I wouldn't wear this." And she goes, "That's okay, dear. You're not playing you. You're playing a character named Rudy who would wear that." And it was the right call. That was a great leather jacket. So I didn't realize until years after I even heard Ryan started telling that story, which I was fascinated by, that he's like, "Oh, now I know what we're doing. We're making movies. This is how movies are made. It's not about me. It's about these characters and storytelling and learning how to do that." And he learned that, in that moment. It took me when I realized that there was, sometimes we learn by osmosis and we don't realize it for years later. But I remember reading, we're getting ready to do that scene. And look, I'm, despite the haircut, sorry, Jeff, and the bad clothes, I'm still me. I'm from LA. I grew up here. Like, I'm cool. Like, I have, hair product and, I wore Van slip-ons before Van slip-ons were cool. Like, I wore original Van slip-ons, damn it, from the 70s. And, I'm LA. I'm cool, right? I'm from the Valley. I'm even cooler because I'm from the Valley. And, which doesn't necessarily make it cooler, but I'm reading this page and I asked Fred, I was like, "Look, can I change this? Like, I don't know what this word means. I've never heard it. And I feel really dumb saying it. Like, it's not a cool word. I wouldn't say this." And in that moment, Fred's response to me, I remember it very well. He goes, "Tell you what, let's try it a couple times as it is. And then maybe we'll try one or two with something else. We'll pick something." And I don't even remember if we got to changing it to something that I would say. And I mentioned the Ryan story before because what Fred was doing at that moment was saying the same thing that the costumer said to Ryan. He goes, "It's okay if you feel silly saying this word or you're uncomfortable saying this word, because Andre is not saying this word. Sean Crenshaw is saying this word. And this is a word that Sean Crenshaw uses. Yep. Storytelling. That's movie making. And these are things you learn when you're 13 that you don't realize until you're 30. And I think those are two great stories about something that just adds some more depth to some amazing stuff that went down. If you don't realize it for years later. But yeah, Nards, thank the maker, as 3PO would say, that I didn't change it or we didn't do it, because it becomes one of the most iconic things out of this movie. It becomes part of kid nerddom lexicon.
It's a word. I mean, it is.
And it's now a thing to certain circles. If you say Nards, you're dealing with a Monster Squad, member of the club. And, honestly, the selfish part of it is it made it really easy because there's no other title for the documentary.
Yeah, you said that. I tried to think of one and I was like, no, they nailed it. Like, I cannot think of a better
look. And it always was that. And then we had to sit down being professionals, and Henry and I and Wes and I and even my wife, we sat down and said, okay, what are some alternate titles in case this doesn't get cleared, or is this the right one? Should we be using Nards in this way? Like, it's not. And there was no other title. The only other title that may have risen to a deep second place was the Squad Doc. And that's what ended up being the handle, for social media, because it's easier. Because Wolfman's Got Nards, 1 was taken, and 2 was way too long for a social handle.
Yeah.
But yes, someone's had that for years, and he's a dude has a podcast in Scotland. But who I know now. It's great. But yeah, Nards. Josh didn't want to say it, didn't know it. I'm sure and I asked, I think it was some word that Shane may have heard or used in growing up in Pittsburgh area. And that's about it. And I was like, look, us cool kids don't say that. But you know what? I wasn't playing a cool kid. I was playing Sean, and we do say it. And it became this thing, which is, unthinkable, unimaginable without Nards in the world now.
And it's the conversation between, Sean and Horace about it. like the commitment to saying it, then the what, and then it's like he said it doesn't come off as like some silly thing. Like that just became what me and my friend said. Like we're just like, well, that's what it is now. You kick somebody in the nards. Like if we were playing football, you got hit in the nards. Like it never. That's just what it became instantly. Like
now, can you imagine how big Nards would have been if the movie succeeded?
You know what?
You're talking about a small group of people that saw this movie at that time, and it still became a thing. Imagine if it was this huge box office success that everybody saw. We would have been making there would have been Nards Studios and it would have been crazy.
It would have been
a Nards ride at Disneyland. It would have been incredible.
It would have been stuff like Marty McFly. Everything he says in Back to the Future became
Right.
But what's so funny, I told Josh before the show, not to derail you again, Josh, but it is so funny that you bring up, imagine if it's weird that 12-year-old me, 13-year-old me, because there is no internet, because there is no social media, all there is my little world, my bubble. I did not know until decades later, like you guys say, that it wasn't the biggest movie ever, because that's all I knew, because it was part of my life. Everybody I knew watched it. And I said, what all I could come up with is but 13-year-old Jeff didn't have disposable income. He didn't have a say. I didn't have Disney Plus to click on it, a million times. I didn't have Netflix. They don't know. And I don't know that nobody knows. All I know is that everybody I know, but who's that? It's a bunch of 13-year-olds in a recess. In my globe. And so when I hear years later that, if you would have told me when this was the first time I ever looked, at the IMDb and everything, I'm like, oh, good. It's got a good percentage, which is crazy for an 80s movie. And then I looked at the gross and stuff, and I was like, well, this can't be right. This is one of the biggest movies of all time. I don't understand what I'm seeing here. And then when I start digging into the research, I'm blown away.
Yeah.
And so it's so weird for someone like me, and I don't care. I still look at it as one of the greatest movies of my life, and doesn't matter what it did, but it is that's why your documentary was so enlightening. I'm like, I had no idea. I really for the last, for the 30 years plus, I'm like, I don't know. It's just everybody's seen it. It's one of the biggest movies ever.
Right.
And I always wondered, I told Josh, I'm like, I assumed there'd be 7 of them. I assumed I'd have action figures, but you don't think about it.
There would have been, yeah. And
then you hit 15 or 16, and honestly, it fades. It fades, and then other things become really important in high school. And so it's not like you have all this time to.
Jeff?
Yeah, what are those?
Economics.
Yes, exactly.
World history.
So it is so funny, and then as I have a kid, and then all this stuff starts coming back around, and I'm like, why can't I find this movie? I don't understand why it was so hard for me to dig it up. And then once I've seen the story, I'm like, I had no idea that I lived on the other side of the story, to where I didn't realize that this was happening.
And that's why I think that was a big part of the documentary, because it is the history of this movie. It's part of that 30-year story.
Yeah.
And a lot of people were blown away that it wasn't, because they just grew up and thought it was the coolest movie and their favorite thing. And it imprints as that, because no one's reading trade magazines. No one's reading, box office numbers when we're 13, except for us. And it was a difficult kind of 2 weeks, or maybe a week. It was just 2 weekends where we drove around to go see how it's going. And you realize that no one's in these theaters. And what's really, tragic about it is, or disappointing about it is, what it could have been if it was a hit, or why. And, we look into the why a little bit in the documentary, because I think there's 4 to 6 answers that, contributed to it. But in 1987, it's different today for things that you guys have mentioned in this context. But 1987, you have I'm sure it's some dude in a double-breasted suit at some studio or movie chain going, okay, this movie's coming out. It's got to reach this number by Sunday afternoon, otherwise it's gone. And that's how they did it. If your movie didn't reach some arbitrary sales number by 48 hours, you're done. You're out. You're gone, because they got to make room for the next one. And it's such a tight window of your 48, maybe 72 hours, depending on if you open on a Friday, to make that impact for a studio exec or a movie chain exec to go, okay, give it one more weekend. And it didn't happen. Because what happened is for a number of reasons, 4, 5, 6 different reasons, but the kids that did see it in the theater, I don't know where you first saw it, Jeff. I don't know if you first saw it in a theater or not.
I think it was probably HBO or something. I really don't think
that's where the next giant, batch, the bigger batch, and then home video. But they saw it on a Saturday, went to school on Monday, and said, "Josh, holy shit, man! I just saw this cool movie. I'm going back to the mall on Saturday and see it again. You got to come with me. You're gonna love it because it's kids that like comic books and monsters. Josh, you got to come with me." So Josh and I get on our bikes to go to the mall on the next Saturday, and it's not there anymore.
Yeah.
And so as a movie lifeline, that's disappointing or tragic. But where the real kind of disappointment comes in, or it's disappointment for an individual, but tragedy for all of us, is with someone like Fred Decker, who is, you have 48 hours to either be a success or not. That's a little unfair. With no word of mouth time, no social media to someone tweet and go, "Oh my God, I just saw Monster Squad, #Nards."
Yeah.
Can you imagine if Monster Squad came out and it was a hit and we had #Nards?
Yeah.
Oh,
come on.
Or if this comes out now on video on demand, it's gigantic. It's colossal.
It still goes on every streamer, it just trades from Hulu to Netflix to Amazon. Right now, I think it's still on Amazon. It was a weird thing when the doc came out because right when the documentary dropped for VOD on Amazon Prime, Amazon got rid of Monster Squad as the movie. I was like, I thought your whole thing was algorithms. It's like, where's the math whiz here, you dumbasses? It's the doc about this movie. Why would you not reinforce that? And then a couple months or a couple weeks, they actually brought it back. They got it back. To me, it's tragic because that is a career killer for someone like Fred, at least for the time being. And Monster Squad Fred made 3 movies starting when he was 25. And within 3 or 4 years, he made 3 giant studio major motion pictures. They all didn't do well in the box office, and that's the only barometer of success. Box office is not the barometer of success now.
No.
It is the social media interaction and the exposure and the mentions. It's not tickets, it's the mentions. Yeah. You can get a sequel to a movie that no one saw if it gets enough mentions, which doesn't mean ticket price.
Right.
So it's a whole other world. We didn't have that. Fred didn't have that.
Right.
And what's really tragic, it's not personal that our movie didn't succeed. It's the fact that we don't get to see all the other stuff that Fred was wanting to make.
Yeah, I agree.
Yep.
And look, the next project down the line, besides a sequel, if that, that'd been cool. But I know what was coming next in Fred's mind, and in the meetings. And when Monster Squad didn't do well, or RoboCop 3 didn't do well. I mean, look, RoboCop 3, what are you? You're 27 years old. You get offered the 3rd installment of a giant, RoboCop friend. What are you're going to turn that movie down? You're not going to turn that movie down. And Fred made the movie he wanted to make. RoboCop 3 is RoboCop 3. He flies, goddammit. He flies. RoboCop 3 flies. But I know the stuff that was behind that and lining up and coming up for that. But when your name is that writer director and your movies don't do well, you go to director jail. And it takes a jailbreak or some CIA intervention to get you out of that black site. And he didn't get that. Shane ended up being okay because at the same time, if it was just Monster Squad, then Shane may not have. If Lethal Weapon hadn't popped before Monster Squad came out, it could have been a different story.
That's true, man.
So people always say the cliche about Hollywood: it's not what you know, it's who you know, and it's all timing.
It really is.
So after this movie comes out and does that, you and the rest of Ryan and I don't know how close you were to Ashley being so young, but did you guys keep together, or did you not come together until the resurgence?
I mean, for a number of years after Monster Squad, so I was 14, Ryan was 15, turning 16, Ashley, was 5, 6, 7,
Yeah, that's why I was asking.
we were all friends after that, obviously, and probably saw them regularly. I mean, Ryan and I hung out a bunch. Ryan was, he had a car before I had a car. We would ride around, and go to people's houses and go to parties and go to events together. Ashley would come over for birthdays and vice versa.
Oh, wow.
And same thing, going, 3, 4, 5 years in the future. Cause we always had good birthday parties. And my 16th birthday was coming up, which was a big one. My 18th birthday was a big one coming. So, everybody comes to stuff like that. And also you're still working in the industry. So you see each other on auditions and you see each other on sets and all this stuff. And then you're friends because you did this, this movie. But like I said before, in 91 came along, I graduated high school, ended up going to college, nowhere near LA or Hollywood. And so I'm away from it for a while. And it was really a bunch of good timing in 2005, end of 2005, beginning of 2006, that things started to kind of percolate. People had kind of reached out and contacted me a little bit about Monster Squad. And then I got this very, very, what ended up being a life-changing for all of us, email from a guy named Aaron Morgan, who lives in Austin, Texas, used to work at a site called Ain't It Cool News, with a guy named Eric Vespi. And Aaron, who I'm still friends with, him and his wife Kayla today. She just had a birthday a little while ago. They still live in Austin. I get to stay in their house when I'm in town. He reached out to me on my Yahoo email or something, and said, "Hey, my friend is trying to put together a screening. We work for this new site. There's a theater down here that does cool stuff like this. Do you have any interest in doing this? If so, here's his email." And luckily I got that email and read it and then contacted Eric, and then they contacted everybody else. And Ryan and Ashley and I and Fred Decker went to Austin, Texas, to do 2 late night screenings of Monster Squad on 35 millimeter at the first and only at the time Alamo Drafthouse Cinema in 2006. And that's what started all of this. And so then we really, got to see each other again, which we hadn't in a while, but really kind of serendipitously, which is totally a word. I was in North Carolina at the time. I had been in LA. I just moved back because I had this whole project kind of not happen. I went to go visit a friend of mine, ended up working with his company, and I get these emails. And all at the same time, Ashley had just moved back to LA and she reached out to me. I had connected with Ryan through somebody else and said hello. It all ended up working at the same time. And it's for the resurgence. It was all timing. And look, that happened, and we're like, oh my gosh, people. And then the next spring, we're headlining Monster Mania in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, which is a giant horror convention. And there's a guy there saying, "Oh, we're doing the interviews for the DVD. Lionsgate's putting out the Monster Squad 20th anniversary." We're like, "No, they're not. No one has told us this. We don't know who you are, Michael Felsher. And please, stop saying these weird words." And we were totally taken aback. Didn't know this was happening. They announce it, and then the DVD comes out and goes absolutely bonkers. And now we go to San Diego Comic-Con. We're releasing the 20th anniversary DVD. There's 1,500 people there trying to get their copy signed. Lionsgate had no idea what they had, and they kept selling out and had to reissue. Sold out, had to reissue. And then all of a sudden, all these Monster Squad fans were like, finally, we're getting a DVD, and it's out of print again. Nobody can get it again. And they're like, no! And, and then 2 years later, a Blu-ray comes out, and then another Blu-ray. And but all this time, we think that this is it doesn't stop. It doesn't stop. And conventions and screenings. I love going to one-off screenings of Monster Squad and have 100, 150 people in the theater, in Denver or, Omaha or West Virginia or something. And just being there inside of this theater with all these people, and this was an experience to watch people watch Monster Squad widescreen on 35, which they hadn't seen in 20 something years, and lose their minds and then tell their stories. And that kept going on and going on. And I realized that there was something really cool here and something different than other fandoms, and different than other, look, there's all movies that we can all rip off in the snap of a finger of what movies impacted us as kids or adults or certain times, or this movie I saw in college, that means something to us. But I realized there's something Monster Squad kids are connected to this movie differently. And we didn't know what that was. And then I started listening to these, because they all sounded the same, but yet they were all very individual. And they were all very deep. And then when you actually turn your antenna into that a little bit, and really start understanding and listening to this, there's something really cool there. And as that kept going for another number of years, I realized that those stories were a story. And it wasn't about the documentary was never meant to be about us, not even really about the movie. It's about the impact that this movie had on people and how it can change or affect their lives or their careers, and that's what it ended up. It turned out to be so much better than my original even thought that a documentary could be. But it was never about us. It was always about the fans and their stories and how connected they are to this and what it means to them. And that's really cool.
Yeah, I think the biggest secret, and take it from somebody, I am literally in the wheelhouse of that. What really helps is that the cast, the crew, take this as serious as we do. You get a lot of these movies that people really love, and then say one of the actors is kind of like, oh, I don't want to, like, I want to forget that ever happened or whatever. And you're like, wait a minute, I love this. Like, it hurts. You guys embrace it, and you're so like cognizant of how much we care about it, and you're not embarrassed by the movie, because you shouldn't be. It's a great movie, but there's no like, oh, I want to forget about that part of my, my past or whatever. And when movies do that, sometimes, like, it really hurts. And honestly, I was a little worried about that when I really started deep diving into this, because it does mean so much to me that I'm like, I don't want to hear people make fun of it, because but the opposite happened. All the podcasters, even whether it's a first watch or a second watch, like a guy like Josh, who's much younger, they're all like, no, I had a great time. It was awesome. And then I listened to the interviews, and then like they'll interview you, and then after the interview, like they'll do their show, and they're like, no, I love that movie. Like, it was fun. I'm going to watch it every year on Halloween.
Right.
So I was nervous about it, because I'm like, you don't, like, I didn't want to hear any negative. And then it turned out quite the opposite. It's been so positive. And so Josh, so kindly asked me to do this a couple months ago, and everybody I've told about it, it's been the same thing. It's like, oh yeah, like, if they don't remember it, they don't remember it. But if they do, to a person's like, oh yeah, that was a blast. We used to watch it all the time. Like, there's been nothing negative. And so, I can't even fathom, like, times 100 or a million what you guys must have felt by, like, wow, like, it was good. Like, we knew it was good. They're telling us, like, there had to be a vindication there of some sort, I would imagine.
Well, I mean, I think a little bit, and look, as the kids that were the actors in the movie, it's always nice to get attention, or we get a tongue bath every now and then. But that can also get old, and why it didn't get old for Monster Squad fans coming up and going, "Oh my God, you don't understand! It's my favorite movie of all time." That's sort of like a bad Alec Baldwin impression, but the reason that did, because that can actually get old after a while.
I could understand, yeah.
Because, and it doesn't, even though we may have heard kind of the same words or gotten the same reaction for someone at a screening or a festival or a convention, what you realize is, or even questions, like, you do podcasts, you get asked, kind of the same, you get asked, a lot of the fundamental questions a lot. And we know the answers, and that's why we're good on the road and Q&As, because we got so good at it between Ryan, Ashley, and I, with like Q&As with groups or panels, that like the question would come up and we would just look, and one of us would take take it because we know what we're going to do with it. It becomes, we know what the answer is and how to deliver it because we went through it. But that could get old too. And it doesn't. Because every time you hear either the same response or the same question, or you meet a fan for the first time and they are losing their minds, it's because it may be the 4,000th time for me or us. It's the first time for them. And you realize that very early on. And you're sitting on this side of the table. And unless you're an asshole, you need to respect that and appreciate that just a little bit. Some people don't. And then they're doing it wrong. We understand that. We're not faking it. And so we learned that early. And we're like, wow, this really means something, people. And this means like this is their moment. We owe them 60 to 90 seconds of focus and time. And then let's get their story. Let's find out, where they're from, where did it lead to? Like, oh, you met your husband because of Monster Squad. And that happens all the time.
Yeah.
And these are all very unique stories. And they're very, very important to these people. And we realized that very, very early on in this kind of resurgence process. And you appreciate that and you respect that because then you think back out of it, like, oh, I could get tired of this or this gets boring, or then you got to step back and realize how many people get to do this.
Right.
How many people out there are being asked to do this or being, stood in front of by these people and explaining how important something that you had a part in. You didn't make it. I didn't write it. But I love when those guys get to experience the same thing that we have sort of been sort of the sponge for over the years. Very few people that are actors get to be in that situation. You can make movies your entire life and no one gives a shit. You could be a character actor or lead man, make 25 movies. They're like, oh yeah, that's a cool movie.
Yeah.
And no one's ever lost their mind in front of them or cried because a moment was so important to them that they're meeting the three of us or the two of us or me or just Ryan, or explaining how badass Phoebe is, to an original fan that gets to show it to her daughter. Those never get old. So as long as they want to keep talking about it, I'm right here.
That's awesome of you guys.
That is awesome. I guess I'm going to take a quick thing and I'm going to tell the story of when I didn't get to see Monster Squad on the big screen and Wolfman's Got Nards.
Okay.
And yeah, there is, and I doubt my wife's listening, so she's never going to hear this. So there is a picture of me on Facebook and I'm just looking off to the side annoyed. And she says, when your husband gives you this face on date night. And that night was the night Monster Squad and Wolfman's Got Nards was having a showing in Charlotte, North Carolina. And I didn't get to go because the daycare was having one of their parents' night out things where we could drop the kids off. My wife decided we were doing that. And I was not happy because that was my only chance to see it there. Because guys were in Charlotte. I know that because I was like, I can drive to Charlotte. And I'm like less than 2 hours from Charlotte. It would have been driving distance from.
So yes, so you missed seeing both on the screen. I guess that was during either one-off or maybe Charlotte Film Festival. Maybe
I think they have a small festival up there. I think that's
that was awesome because they got to show that doc. Now where's 2 hours away? Where do you live, Josh?
Greenville, South Carolina.
I was just there.
What?
I was just in Greenville 2 months ago.
Really?
Yes, and we missed it. I actually drove down there. I was in Raleigh for a little bit, which is sort of like, always been second home base. And my best friend from my second college and team is we're old enough now that their kids are being recruited to play in college. And she was in a showcase. She's a big high school basketball rising senior, and she was in a showcase in Spartanburg. And so we drove to Greenville I got to drive to visit my good friend Josh Cohn and watch his daughter Hannah playing a couple of showcase games at the big Adidas tournament. So that's kind of cool. But I mean, if you grew up in Spartanburg, I'm getting ready to blow your mind, Josh, because this is stuff that Jeff is getting into. When I went to college, I went to college to play basketball. So I left LA, left the career because my short little ass wanted to play basketball in college. And that was long story short, I ended up with this opportunity to play at a well-known, there's not too many around anymore. It was a private junior college at the time called Lewisburg College, north of Raleigh. And in the South, over 100 years or so, there was a ton of these private 2-year schools that ended up being 4-year schools, but they were great feeder stuff into stuff, and a lot of them had good sports programs. I ended up playing for this amazing, old school, famous junior college coach named Enid Drake, and it was just because a family friend had a connection, and it just worked out. And I packed up my car and drove across. I drove from LA to Lewisburg in the summer of '91, and to the middle of nowhere, and played basketball. The reason that is the region that we played in all these great schools are things like North Greenville College and Anderson College and Spartanburg Methodist and Montreat Anderson and all these small schools that are now 4-year schools in your area, but. Spartanburg Methodist was one of the toughest schools in the country at that time, and we had one of the time, I think my sophomore year, had the number 1 or number 2 ranked JUCO player in America at Spartanburg Methodist, a guy named James Scott, and I had to guard that fool for a half a game. It was a completely wacko decision. In the regional tournament at our place my sophomore year, and I was supposed to be guarding this other guy named Jawan Tuck, who was the short point guard, who was also very good, and going to frickin' Seton Hall. And James Scott was killing us in the first half. I mean, he had like 16 or 18 points in the first half, and Coach Drake at halftime, he announced the matchup to him. He said, "You're taking James Scott." In front of him, and I went, that doesn't seem logical. And then as we were walking onto the court, Coach Drake, old school guy. I mean, he coached at Lewisburg for 40 something years, and he was already older at this time. And he took me aside, and one of the things that I could get after it on the defensive end. And he said, if he can't touch it, he can't shoot it. And that's how Coach Drake talked. And I knew in that minute what the next 20 minutes of my life were. Ooh. And that was to not allow James Scott to catch the basketball.
Deny the ball.
And
wow.
I did nothing else. He had 4 points in the second half, folks. Yeah.
All right, well,
nice.
You held him.
We still lost, but
okay, so we'll dig into
I
this.
succeeded in my weird endeavor of guarding the top JUCO player in the country for 20 minutes.
I got to dig into this a little bit, and then I'll let Josh get back on track. So we're talking, 90s. That's like the point guard was different then. It was very important then. So what kind of point guard were you in the 90s? Like what's a comparison?
Ooh, comparison to other point guards?
Yeah, I'm just trying to get a feel for
there was a great point guard in the 80s at NC State called Chris Corchiani.
Okay. Absolutely.
Great point guard, hustler, built like a fire hydrant,
yep.
Sort of like me, and hustled. Offense really, scoring wasn't his thing. If he had a chance, he put it in, but it was about setting up and running the game for his team on both ends. North Carolina as a system under Dean Smith was basically a system that Dean Smith invented over, 75 years of coaching.
Oh yeah. 4 corners.
And he changed the game in many ways on things that he actually invented or created or reinvented. And the Carolina system for many, many, many years keys off the point guard. And so all of the point guards at Carolina in the 80s and yes. early 90s were Keith, like King Rice and things like that. And this is my era in high school. But I love that, there was an era of basketball where there was position players and they had roles, and the point guard was different because usually the point guard was, the floor leader, was either getting signals or creating stuff based. And when you get into the collegiate level in things like a Carolina system, which I ended up playing in my junior and senior year because I played for a former Carolina player and a Carolina assistant coach. And so that we were doing the Dean Smith Carolina, which is very, very intricate, very, very complex, and a lot of options depending on if you pass the ball left or pass the ball right. 4 other people did different things.
Yeah.
And the point guard's in control of all that. And I've always loved basketball. I always thrived in that kind of situation. It came to me naturally or easily. I don't, it's the physical part of it's hard because, I'm shorter in stature and I wasn't as strong, but I was fast and I would hustle my ass off. And that was my ticket. And I got good. I got a lot better because I had great coaches and good teammates. But to learn those, I was really into that concept. And then as timing would have it, when I got to college, 5 guys in Michigan changed the entire game.
They sure
and now
did.
They had this thing where everybody was 6'8", and all the 5 guys were exactly the same. And so the position play, like everybody wanted that. And I'm like, no, I'm here. This is it. Like I'm that guy. And the Fab Five ruined it. I think Fab Five ruined basketball for a while. But what's interesting is it changed it. It kind of went back to it for a number of years. But now if you look at basketball, which I don't much, everybody's this proto giant super athlete that is all the same. It's like we got Kevin Durant, he's 6'10", handling the ball and pulling up from 35. You're like, no. But back in the day, if you were 6'10", you never went above the foul line. Like you were on a block, and that's it. And if you ventured out, you'd get in trouble.
There's no post game now. Like essentially, even a centers might we're talking like Embiid plays on the perimeter half the
That's
time.
right.
Like,
so you got centers that are 7'1" standing 35 feet away from the game. So the whole game changed, and that's fine. And look, the game was completely different when I played it than it was in the 60s. It was different when it was in the 40s. So games evolve, sports evolve. And that's totally fine. I was a student of the game. I love the history of it. I love the romance of sports. The romance of basketball is a completely different thing.
Yep.
And it really does have at a time. This is why I think maybe, Jeff, I just figured out, because you asked, do you watch? I was like, I don't anymore. And I realized that the elegance is gone. There used to be such an elegance to the game of basketball. Not in the early days, because it was kind of clunky and very robotic. And my guy bounced back. And then the athleticism came in, and it got more complex, and it got stylized a little bit. And then probably going through the 80s and mid 90s, there was such an elegance to the game when it was played a certain way, and it was intoxicating, and that becomes romantic. And these are a lot of words people don't use with sports.
No, yeah,
but it's true. True students of the game, they realize this, and if you've ever been inside of complex, high level sports, like football is the most complex game to me, and they have plays and different things and it is so intricate. And then all these fans get mad when a wide receiver runs the route left when he's supposed to go right. It's like, do you know what's going on right now? The guy made a mistake. It's like,
trust me, as a sports podcaster, no offense.
Yeah, there's 7,000 options now.
No offense to my fans, but most of them don't. And
they don't understand it.
Sorry,
but this,
Josh.
Personally for me, I loved the game of basketball. I was a baseball player too. I was a soccer. I was a good tennis player. I should have played all these other sports on the college level, but I chose the one, and I think this has other genetic implications. But I played the one that when I said I want to play basketball in college, everyone goes, that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
And I went, that's the last thing you tell me, because watch. So now, up yours. I'm going to go make this happen. I don't care how it happens, just because I'm going to prove you wrong. And a lot of people think I was stupid for doing that. A lot of people was like, you just left at a peak of a television and film career to go play basketball. What is that going to do for you? And I was like, well, if I do it right, then my goal is to play overseas. I don't care where it is, because that's another kind of thing to achieve. A leveling up that if I work at it, maybe I can get that. And I did. I got offered. So I made this offer.
That's amazing. It really is amazing.
Yeah, and it's the timing of it. I like I said, I love the elegance and the romance of what that game did. And I miss my time. I really wish I was a college basketball player from like 1968 to 1972, or maybe 74 to 70. in the classic time, because I'm a classic player, I understand I'm a super fundamental guy. But then the athleticism started coming into the game, and that's what was the elegance. And then it became really interesting. And then the athleticism just went off the charts. Now the athleticism is a hindrance because everybo's a super athlete.
It's crazy.
You're like, no.
It's a different sport. Yeah. So growing up, who was your favorite player? That'd be my last sports question, Josh. I promise.
Oh man, I have to go.
Or I shouldn't say.
I love, early days. I loved Dr. J. I loved that 76ers team of the early 80s. But look, I grew up in LA. I'm a Laker fan.
I was too. I didn't grow up in LA, but I was.
It doesn't get.
Showtime was as good as it gets.
Showtime was amazing. But talk about almost something that was also antithetical to what the game is like. They call it Showtime. It's not Showtime. It's like you got to buckle down. Those guys were good. That was amazing. Yeah. Magic Johnson was a force. Kareem was a force. James Worthy. My favorite Lakers were Michael Cooper and Kurt Rambis.
Oh, I loved Kurt Rambis.
So
I always wanted to just have the goggles. I just wanted to have the goggles. These guys did the work and won championships. And
but if you're going to go position player, look, you got to look at the short, stocky guys. And John Stockton was a fantastic.
I can see you got a little Isaiah Thomas in you. You got a little Isaiah Thomas.
Isaiah was good, but I didn't like his attitude.
I thought maybe that's
attitude,
what you would like.
You know why? You have attitude when you're really, really good. Yeah. And Isaiah Thomas was really, really good. But look, he's this formidable point guard who's not the tallest guy in the court. Isaiah Thomas was fantastic.
Oh, amazing.
That Pistons team was amazing. Didn't like the Celtics growing up, but you realize that Larry Bird was the man.
That's tough to deal with.
It's tough. It's tough. And but the late, and then that guy, what's his name? Jordan. Jordan comes along.
I've heard of him.
Kind of changes the game, brings that athleticism. Did I like Michael Jordan as a player? He's fascinating. Did I like those Bull teams? Yes. Do I like Michael Jordan as a human being? That's a different podcast.
Yeah.
So it kind of sullies that time, but changed the game, made it really interesting. And then through the 90s, I think my favorite player was Tim Duncan.
Oh, of course. Yeah, great. Yeah, absolutely.
And
you might put a little Iverson in there, a little underdog role.
Iverson I didn't like because I didn't like the attitude. But then I watched the stories and read about Allen Iverson and watched the documentary. I realized Allen Iverson was never really allowed. Yeah. And then what he ended up doing, like if Allen Iverson had the opportunities or opportunities that other players got, lights out. Probably one of the most talented basketball players that have ever walked on this earth. But came from and had to do it. And he fought like he did when he was a kid on the court. And that dude was little and he took it to you. Allen Iverson was a scorer. Yeah. And, it was fascinating. And what I didn't like the showiness of a lot of the 90s. But what's really funny is for some reason on my social feed, I keep getting Jason Williams supercuts. Okay. And if you watch Jason, everybody's like, oh, this guy, he was just trash talker, street baller, park player. Yo. You didn't like him, you didn't like what it was, you didn't like the teams that he played on. Because they're sort of the rough and tumble type teams of the late 90s and early 2000s. Yeah. Jason Williams could hoop.
He had 2 years of highlight reels. Unbelievable. It was wild that they let him do it. That they were just you would never it. That was a once in a lifetime.
And being someone who loved to drop a dime and make a great pass, because I got more joy or excitement out of making a pass that someone scored on than scoring. Yeah, every time.
To take it back to the movie, that's what you were so great at.
Yeah,
you made everybody else around you better.
Yeah, so like I said, maybe it all those two different kind of worlds all kind of weave together. And one of my dearest friends on the planet is a teammate that I actually went to two schools, and I got to play with one guy all 4 years, and because we got recruited together to go play at UNC Asheville after Lewisburg College. And so I was even closer to you for a number of years. I was at years in Asheville. And, the overall situation was different. There was other decisions that I now wish I had made to go location wise. But William Coley and I played together. We were freshmen together. We ended up being team captains together at our first school. And then we got recruited by the coach that went to UNC Asheville, who played for Dean Smith for years and coached for years. And that was a highlight of my life, is to get to play all 4 years with a good friend of mine. And we got named Batman and Robin, and he was, 5'6" black kid, and I'm, he's a 6'5" black kid, and I'm a 5'6" white kid playing basketball together, and we were two peas in a pod. Couldn't come from any more opposite backgrounds or situations. And if William Coley needed someone to jump in front of a train and take a charge, I would do it. And if Andre Gower needed it, William Coley would be right there.
Man, that's dope.
We're still friends. I just saw him a little while ago. I'm gonna get to see him again when I go to town. And then like I have really good friends from my playing days, like William and Josh Cohn, whose now daughter is getting recruited to play in school. She set the high school national record. She had 19 threes in a game this year.
Holy smokes.
Yeah. So,
the game's changed. The game's
changed. Spread the love for Hannah Cohn out there. She's dropping fucking threes on everybody. And, and she's going to go to a good school. And Ralph Malis and there's all these guys that, that you sweat and bleed with and break fingers with and roll ankles with and tumble on the ground and win games and lose games. It's something that I wouldn't have traded it.
And that comes a lot coming from like the opportunities that you could have had. So that means a lot when you say that. And I'm sure obviously your teammates, it came off like it's genuine. They obviously knew that you were in. That's what I mean. Like this guy's all in. He doesn't have to be here.
Yeah. Or why is he here? It's like, why is this guy here? And it was great. You're talking about, passing and highlight and, anytime someone's an athlete or played sports in their life, they'd be 70 years old and remember a shot they made or a putt that they drained 30 years ago, to save par or something. And it's those things. I remember these. I remember passes. I remember passes that I made to William, and he would just he'd poster somebody, or we won a game because of this score, pass, or I dropped it down, and William and I I didn't have to look, I just knew where it should go wherever he was, and we were so in sync. And that ended up happening with Josh Cohn, who was actually a point guard and a two guard. He was about best shooter I have ever seen in my life, and I'll put $100 in a game of horse and Josh Cohn, and you name whatever player you want.
Wow.
I've never seen a guy just
like
this kid.
We know where his daughter gets it from then. That's what you're telling me.
Never saw a shot he didn't like, number one. But the problem is a lot of guys are like that, but they don't put it in like this.
He
it didn't matter
now.
Where. It was ridiculous.
Now.
It was ridiculous. And it was playing with Josh and throwing, it's just fun. And it's a thing that I made that decision. People are like, why are you doing, like, you could be on a series next year? I was like, yeah, I could also be on a series when I'm 30. I can audition for a sitcom when I'm 30. I can't play college basketball when I'm 30. It's over. There's a small window of time and there's an opportunity, and I don't want to play what if. And I didn't. So I made that decision, much to the chagrin of a handful of a lot of people.
Yeah, but that was a very mature decision for someone your age to make, though.
Well, remember, I started. I started being a human doing stuff a lot sooner than others.
There's an entrepreneur at 5 years old, so yeah,
that's right. That's right.
I see a world where Andre is like in a, I don't know, now would be like a VOD series. Like he's a gritty veteran high school basketball coach who's like I don't know. He goes to a rundown high school, and it's a mismatched group of kids, and he's got to bring them up to his level. I see that.
I'll do that. Yeah,
you'd be great as a high school or as a basketball coach. Like, oh my goodness.
What's funny, I'd really like to do some sort of show or a movie at some point that brings, movies and sports together. Because some of the best movies out there have been sports movies.
Oh, absolutely.
With character and perseverance. It's all about perseverance. And coming back up, getting a second chance, making something out of nothing. These are all great they're all sports stories. And whether, you're a superstar or not, that's, Hoosiers is just the movie. The Natural is a fantastic film. Bull Durham is a fantastic film that everybody thinks the campy and the humor and the naughtiness of Bull Durham. You're missing the story. You're missing the romance of baseball with this character Crash Davis and what it means. And is it tragic that he didn't get the notoriety that he should have because he was just as good as anybody else, or is the game better off because he played in the minors for 20 years and, helped all these other players go and be something. Those are stories that only happen in sports, and they're human conditions, and talk about romance. And those are all romantic stories.
Absolutely.
And you can get the biggest, baddest lineman or basketball players that when Hoosiers plays and, they go to them, there's, it's the same thing with Monster Squad fans when, Phoebe throws scraps. It gets you. It's
important. Yeah.
It gets you. When, when Robert Redford hits that shot and hits the lights of The Natural, like you get the lights, you get the music, you get the slow motion, it's going to get you. You're going to, something's going to be in your eye.
I admittedly, I can't rewatch the movie Friday Night Lights because I get, it was right at the time. And then my son went through high school football, and I literally can't watch it because I'm so emotional that it's too much. Like I can't watch the movie because it pulls every string. So it
does all over the place. And that was very visceral and very kind of current and real. You had movies in the 90s like The Program and things like that, ironic with James Caan, but who just passed. And it's kind of like far-fetched, and it was kind of very, Florida State.
It was more far-fetched a few years ago. It's closer to
right, it's closer now.
It's becoming more
but it wasn't far
relevant
off. But
every day.
Friday Night Lights was it. And Booby Miles isn't a fictional character. There are Booby Miles in every town.
Yeah.
And
well, he's literally not a fictional character. I mean,
right? Yeah, exactly.
He was supposed to be a college football star, and
yeah, look, here's an example of, if you're, Jeff, you're a sports guy. Josh, we'll go back to the other stuff too, but or Jeff, we may have to go on your other podcast and talk sports, but
anytime.
I'm a football guy. I'm just
you're a football guy. That's okay. I just never played football. It's all right. Yeah. But when I showed up, I literally drove across country. I had a bright red Mustang. I had a bright red Mustang 5.0.
Of course you
with
did.
A white stripe. I drove from LA to Lewisburg, North Carolina. I pull up on campus with, sheets and towels and, tennis rackets and stuff in the back of my stuff and all my clothes. And I pull on the campus, and the campus was full of media. And I'm like, it's not for me. I was like, what's all this media doing here on this small campus in the middle of nowhere? And what it was is, if anybody remembers, back in 1991, at the time, one of the biggest baseball contract things was going on with a kid named Brian Taylor.
Oh, yeah. New York Yankees first pick, right?
That's right. So it was New York Yankees first pick. And in baseball, if midnight happens when school starts, you lose that play if you don't sign them. And it was Lewisburg College was a huge baseball school. Basketball was secondary, and Coach Drake was totally fine with that. He didn't care about wins and losses. My coach was actually, his job was making men and teaching kids that usually came from low incomes or rural areas or inner, and how to do things the right way over and over and over again. And he, a lot of times at the end of the day, if he lost a game, he'd be like, I don't care about wins and losses. Guy ended up having 1,000 wins or something in college, but or 700 wins really, which is the milestone. I was there for his 500th, so it was great. The Brian Taylor was on campus, and that was a giant, I think the signing bonus was like $1.5 million, and at 11:59 or something they signed, and he packed up his bag and walked out of his dorm room and left school, and he was on campus for that day. Yeah. And that was a big deal. And then I bring it up because of sports and personally connected to me. I never met him, but a Boobie Miles type of story, because Brian Taylor went off, signed that big deal, was in double A or triple A ball, and went home, to I can't remember where he's from, some small town, southeastern North Carolina, and had a disagreement with a guy and threw a punch. And had he hit the guy, he'd have been fine. But he missed and destroyed his shoulder.
Yep.
And never became.
And that was it.
That was it.
Yeah.
I mean, he went and they rehabbed in it, but he went back to literally laying brick in his hometown. And anytime he mentions something like Boobie Miles or Friday Night Friday, I think I always wanted to make the Brian Taylor movie, because I thought that was a fascinating story.
Yeah. Well, there's still time.
Yeah.
I'm in. I'm in. All right, go ahead, Josh. I'm sorry, buddy.
That goes back to the camaraderie. I wanted to get some of your stories from the set, not favorite scenes. I've heard you talk about that. I want to get some actual stories from the set.
There's some fun stuff, and we were doing this movie. We're talking about Monster Squad, right? With a group of kids, you're shooting this movie. There's all this crazy stuff going around. There's creatures, there's monsters, there's explosions. And that was all, the last 10 days or 2 weeks of the shoot. So it's an amazing being a part of this big thing. And a lot of people think a movie set is just like this big, fun camp. It's like summer camp with like crazy stuff going around. That's not what it is. It's a massive amount of work in a short amount of time, and you can't mess around. And you got to go to school for 3 hours a day. And then you got to show up and know your lines, and then you can't mess up because you're the kid on the set. No one wants the kid to be the reason you missed the day. And then when you're someone like me, where you're in, I don't know, 80% of the scenes in the movie, I haven't done the math. I'm going to say it's at least 70% of the scenes in the movie, right? You're working every day, all day. So it's a lot of work, but you can also have some fun. And we had a great teacher named Elise Gans. One teacher teaches everybody, no matter what grade they're in. You have to bring your school. You have to get your work from your school and complete it and take tests on time and do all this stuff. And you're on the set for 3.5 months. And we got to ride our bikes. We got to, invent games on the side of the, play handball on the side of the stage. I do remember, I don't remember why it was, but I went to Big Five Sporting Goods, and I bought everybody in the squad their own little folding kind of like camping chairs. So we could all just kind of like pop those down and sit around together wherever we were, because they were lightweight and movable. And but you were also on location a lot. We were on the set or on the studio a lot for maybe half the time, location and the other stuff. So you're moving around and seeing things. And what was cool is just being in class, being on break, being on lunch. I think probably one of the coolest things is when you're on a movie lot. And our set stuff was based over at the Culver Studios, which is an old famous movie lot in Culver City. But then we had to go to these locations, and we were on the back lot. Town Square in Monster Squad was on Warner Brothers. So the last final kind of act happens, and that's Dukes of Hazzard Square. That's where the music was shot. That's it's Gilmore Girls Town Square. It's a lot of stuff. And actually where Wolfman comes out and blows up, in the alley, like next to the alley, that's the bar. I forget what they call it in the series Shameless. That's the bar, the Alibi. That's the Alibi in Shameless. No, you're like, wait, what? And so all these things that are shot in these cool places, but probably if we're going to a specific thing is at Universal, and the lagoon where Frankenstein's monsters like kind of a crate falls in and Gilman comes out. And we shot a couple scenes on the bike. They're all adjacent. It's this back lot at Universal Studios. And you have like a little lagoon, you have a little fake beach over here, you got a little cityscape, all these, facades. And then and that's like Gilligan's Island Lagoon. That's like Gilligan's Island stuff.
Wow.
That's awesome. And then as you go through all this kind of like foliage and trees and like real bamboo forests, and like you come out of this like bamboo wall and you are on the Western Street. You're in Western town. So you're in the Western, like where like High Noon was shot. So you're like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
I've seen this show. I was like, holy crap. But what happens when you're working on a movie lot is you may be shooting in that lagoon, but your wardrobe and your dressing room and lunch is literally on Western Street. So like we ate lunch in the saloon of, so like, you're breaking through. So you're going to walk through and be like the sheriff and coming in and wish you had spurs on for all these famous movies. And, we never interacted with, we never saw Tom Noonan out of makeup or out of character. And we never saw Duncan Regeer out of makeup or out of character. Michael McKay, who played the Mummy, was in the Mummy suit, was a different story. We actually interacted with him. We saw him. We ate lunch or dinner with him. And this is hours and hours of getting in this makeup and these costumes. You can't get out of it just to eat. And so we took turns, like putting a straw in his mouth with a soda, like eating him because he had to and take a fake and like eat and like probably not get any, Salisbury steak on his costume.
Yeah.
And Michael Faustino used to like follow him around and make sure, because it's hard to see, and like he would walk him around. So it was just stories like that, who gets to do that? Like who gets to feed the Mummy in the saloon where they made famous Westerns?
Nobody. About 4 people.
Nobody, Jeff. The answer is nobody, except for us. And so it was fun things like that. And look, you said favorite scenes, like obviously shooting, that last sequence was, was just badass. And when you weren't working, like the kids have to be done and out by a certain, time of day. And that's how you make movies with kids, because then the adults stay until the sun comes up and make movies. And, I got to, once I signed out and was actually officially gone, I could hang around and watch some cool shots. And, I got to see them push Wolfman out and blow him up in midair. So I was standing behind
amazing
the camera.
scene.
I was standing behind the camera when that happened. And, because a lot of stuff you don't get to, you're not there for, because you have to go home and go to sleep, because you have to be up at like 7 back to set and working night shoots. And, so it's just fun stuff like that. And getting around and bonding with these kids. I had only known Robbie Kiger. I knew Robbie my whole life because we were kind of the same age, read for the same stuff, never worked together. He did a bunch of, films and a series. I think he was on Knots Landing for years, and, did Children of the Corn. And so I had known Robbie, most of my, basically since I started. We both started when we were 5 or 6, and met Ryan just a few weeks before we started shooting, actually, because Ryan was fairly new. Even though he was 14, the only thing he had done, the first audition he ever went on, was the giant call for Kids Incorporated, and he got it. And so he started Kids Inc. And then in between, his first or second season and the next, he does Monster Squad. And so we met at a party a couple weeks before that. Didn't know Ashley. I knew Michael Faustino just because his brother and I are contemporaries. We're the same age. David and I grew up together. Yeah. And like I said, when you're a kid in the industry of a certain age, everybody, because you see everybody every day, because everybody's auditioning for the same stuff. And when you're not working, you go to school, and then you get in the car and you go to 3 to 6 auditions every day.
Wow.
And that's what my, years were, from, 5, 6 on until I went to college.
It's like the Forrest Gump of acting, and I'm sure most of the stories are like this. Well, minus the basketball and stuff, but it's an amazing journey.
It's unique to me, so I don't know if it translates to other people, but I don't know a lot of others that have done as much crazy shit.
I listen to a lot of podcasts, and so far you're a one-on-one.
And the other thing that's crazy, when people go down, kind of work history and resumes is. And this is all because you work and meet awesome people. And I did a series called Baby Makes 5, which again, I don't know if you see like a there's a pattern of my television career, is that I was the kid that did 6 or 7 series that only went 1 season instead of one show that went 7 years that everybody knows. Okay, so I flipped that around, of course, not up to that wasn't my doing. But things like Fathers and Sons could have gone 5, 6 years as a great show if Ricky Nelson doesn't die in a plane crash.
Yeah.
I did a show called Baby Makes 5 that was a family comedy sitcom, straight sitcom, about a guy who's an accountant, and he has 3 kids, and his wife's pregnant in the pilot, and boop, here comes twins. So baby, it's like just this guy's just inundated with family. He's got 2 crazy grandmothers. They were hilarious. And, a accountant buddy is funny. And that show was called Baby Makes Five. And the lead of that show was Peter Scolari. And Peter Scolari was coming off the end of Bosom Buddies that had just ended. And there was some other guy that went on to, act out of Bosom Buddies for years. But Peter got his own show first. Peter got his own show first. And Peter was a phenomenal talent, just a really nice guy, athletic, and was a juggler. It's Peter would teach whoever he can how to juggle. And we did the show, and I'm a juggler because of Peter Scolari. And we used to, he taught me from day one. And, we used to warm up the audience and perform together and do these little acts. And we would practice, during the day. And Peter had done the show Circus of the Stars the year before as a juggling act. And then he was getting ready to do it again. And he was doing the High Wire with Kari Michelson and Bruce Penhall. And everyone's like, who are these people you're talking about? And but Circus of the Stars was this giant annual show,
huge,
that ran during the holiday time, and where actors and performers joined the circus, and you worked for 3 or 4 or 5 months to learn your act. And Peter knew I was athletic and I could juggle, and he took me out to. It's actually this guy's house. It's a very famous stuntman named Bob Yerke's backyard, who basically there's a circus in his backyard. And there's trapeze and airbags and trampolines and high wires and all this other Russian swings and sway pull, all this stuff. And it's literally a circus in a backyard, and it's a giant playground. And Peter brought me out to meet the people that do the show, and they put me through, kind of some run throughs and up on the, put me on the trampoline, put me on the high wire, put me on the trapeze, and they offered me an act. And so I got to do Circus of the Stars the first time because of Peter Scolari. And then a couple years after that, I did it again. I did a solo act. And it's all of this timing and all this cool, random, weird stuff that you get to do. And at the time, when I did the first act, I did an aerial act called The Double Cradle with Tracy Gold and these two amazing professionals that were in the Redlands Children's Circus, and Bill and Charlie. And see, these are the people because all these people go to your birthday parties, 10 years later.
It's just surreal.
And at the time, I was the youngest one to ever do the show. I was 10. I was like 10 and a half or something when I did the show, and which is crazy. And Amy Foster, who was on Punky Brewster a couple years later, was like 10 years and 3 months and beat my record of the youngest person to do the show. But her and Ernie Reyes Jr. and Scott Grimes did one of the best flying trapeze acts that show had ever seen. And that was the year. Was that the year I did Low Wire? I can't remember. But I was right. That was an amazing act. And it was just fun to be a part of that world, because once you're in that circus world, you get to go anytime you want to. So you can go to the circus when it's in town, because you just go, or you could go to Bob Yerke's house and jump on the trampoline, or fill up the airbag and jump off a 40-foot tower, or fly in the trapeze, or walk on the high wire, or just work on stuff. And he's this famous stuntman. And so I kept doing that for years and years and years. And even after I did the second show, and then they actually kind of moved the show, and then the show got canceled. But even in the 2000s, on Thursday mornings and Saturday mornings, there's I'm adding to the crazy life experiences here, Jeff. On Thursday mornings and Saturday mornings, there was stuntman school. And so it was all these people that either had to be invite only. If you wanted to learn how to be a stuntman, you were an aspiring stuntman, you'd show up on Thursday morning or Saturday mornings at Bob's house. And this guy named Bob Moyo, who's a very famous, legacy, stunt coordinator. And he would bring other people in, and you would just learn how to do stunts. And his, Thursdays was more advanced, and then Saturday was sort of like open park type thing. But you get hurt. I saw a guy get his nose shattered, and because he leaned into a straight punch, and he got his nose broken, and just exploded on the mat. And I was like, well, you know what? You didn't listen. You have to. A fight for the camera is a choreographed dance, and it's on the beats, and you have to know what you're doing, and you got to sell the punch. And it's all for camera angles. And he made the, I'm going to say fatal mistake, but he made the broken bone mistake of your partner expects you to be doing what you're supposed to be doing. And if I'm I didn't throw the punch that broke his nose, but I was standing right there and heard it go. But you can't lean in or move because that guy is going for a distance and a timing thing in this multi-move choreograph. And he came up and did the freight punch, and you leaned in and you were in the wrong position. And you know what? You got your nose broken. And but if you want to be a stuntman, if you expect not to break a bone, you're in the wrong profession. Because all these guys would show up. Oh, guys like Larry Holt, John Moore, all these amazing stuntmen. My
goodness.
They have, if you just look at their hand, they're the strongest people you'll ever meet. They can crush you with a handshake, but they have broken every bone in their body like 4 times. And currently, when you see them, they may have broken bones that are currently broken. And but I got to work on like Bob Moyo and Larry Holt, all these guys, but they worked on Monster Squad, so I knew these guys, and it's a small world, and it's I got to go do that for years. And then because I would go to stuntman workouts on Thursdays and Saturdays, TCM, Turner Classic Movies, was doing like one of their short feature docs on the history of stuntmen. And so they would come to the yard and they would do all the interviews there. And I'm actually in that, in the background, doing stuntman stuff for Turner Classic Movies, like jumping, like I think I'm either on the trapeze or falling into the airbag or doing a Russian something and doing fight scenes in the background while all of these famous, stuntmen are there. Like these are the guys that invented fighting for the camera in the 40s for the saloon fights or,
just say going through the saloon doors.
Yeah. It's
classic.
all this stuff. And it's all these guys would come through. There's just old guys walking around. And these are the same guys that would show up on Saturday morning or Thursday afternoons and teach you little things. And one of my favorite things was doing air ramp. Because when you step on the air ramp, then you get catapulted and you get to tackle like 3 dudes. Like you fly through that's some cool stuff. So I've always wanted to be a stuntman. I always wanted to do my own stunts. I did a little bit in Monster Squad, but being athletic and being able to tumble and get
it
bruised
does seem
up
like a huge benefit.
It's I mean, I used to do this when I was a kid. I would jump off the couches and I would fly over the sink and that's what I did. So now I got to do it for real.
That's fantastic.
All right, so my normal format, Andre, is I talk to people about their favorite movie.
Did we just blow out your normal format? Like, did Jeff and I totally?
Anytime you invite Jeff, it is a.
Well, it's not even that. I don't. This is my normal format. Is just
okay,
we
usually don't have like. Yeah, it's
got it. No, it's and I'm never anybody's normal podcast, so he goes off on tangents and stories about the circus.
No, they're not tangents. So this has been.
All right, Jeff, so normal format.
Okay, I'm sorry.
But it leads to this next part because part of my normal format is getting, and Jeff, you listen, is getting into sequel/remake territory. What would you like to see done with this? A sequel or a remake? None of it. Would you play the dad? You have to play the dad character now, right? Like you're that. That's where you're at in life.
Of Monster Squad?
Of Monster Squad.
I think there's a story there. The interesting thing is everybody talks about like a remake or a sequel of Monster Squad. We've actually seen it. Like a lot of stuff's been really influenced by Monster Squad. If you actually look at stuff, it is very similar. A sequel to Monster Squad would be basically it, meaning Stephen King's It, and we have 5 seasons of Stranger Things, or 4 seasons of Stranger Things. Maybe we'll be in season 5. They've been asked a bunch.
Don't even tease me with that.
Well, there's a campaign, Jeff. Yeah, you got to get your listeners and your followers to start writing the Duffer Brothers.
Well, I told you I'm very trepidation about this stuff because I don't want anything to tarnish what I have.
That's right.
I'm very nervous.
As long as it's done celebratory and in honor of it works. And Josh, I think that starts the answer to your question. Is there I think it's a sequel. I also have other cool thoughts in the Monster Squad universe of the world. If you're doing something that we're involved in its current day, then yes, I think it is us current age with our history and our background. What have we been doing since then? I think that's the cool time. I think it's something happens and it's happening again. in some strange connected way, but different. I think it's certainly a passing of the torch type thing where it's our kids or the kids that we know or have end up saving the day because we think my favorite thing. And there may be a story written that does all this. I wrote one years ago, just off of crazy airplane ride thoughts, and it just keeps getting developed and added to and updated. I think what would be great is that we're the only ones that know what's going on again, but the kids, like our kids, the kids of today, are the ones that actually save our bacon because they come up with something new. Or they're fix it because they show that they're smarter because they've band together the stuff that they've learned throughout their childhood and being around, like they're the heroes. I think that would be the best type of story. Who we are and what we're doing, I think that's open to interpretation. I have some really cool ideas or thoughts about that. I know Fred and everybody else does as well. But I think it's a passing of the torch thing. I think it can add to a lot of other things. One of the things that I think is a cooler, if we're never going to make something that we're playing ourselves, playing our characters again, is one of the biggest kind of, I don't say plot holes, but things that we miss in Monster Squad is, when the movie starts and we have the crawl and it says 100 years ago, Van Helsing and his guys, and then it says they blew it. At the end of Monster, they blew it. Yep. We don't see how they blew it. Like they cut it out of the movie. Like we never get that. And because Monster Squad, any good story, especially
that's a good point. We don't know how. Yeah, we don't know.
We don't know how they blew it. We just take the fact that they fucked it up somewhere. But we do see it. They did shoot it, and what it was is, as they invaded this kind of castle that they chased Dracula down, they actually capture him and they stake him. And there's a great scene. It looks wonderful. And because I have a still photo of Duncan thrown up against a tree, being pinned against it with guys, and he's got this menacing look on his face.
Wow!
And it's over the shoulder of Van Helsing with a mallet and a stake, getting ready to get him. It's a wonderful photo. Yeah. And they leave the body in a wagon, and they go to the castle to do the amulet limbo thing and suck all the and balance it back out because they've killed Dracula. They've killed him. He's in a wagon with a stake in him. They leave a guy who I always call the Van Helsing red shirt by the campfire. And as he's sitting there, and they're up in the castle doing their stuff, and it all kind of happens at the same time. 3 vampire brides come out of the misty woods and attack this guy. And he shoots one with his crossbow. He stakes the other one, and then the other one's choking him, and he's flailing around. He grabs a stake, kills her, is like, ha-ha, I did it. And of course, in vampire mythology, if you unstake a vampire, they come back to life. And as he was getting choked, the stake he finds is the one that's in Dracula, and he takes it out to save himself. And then Duncan sits up in the wagon. And so Dracula lives, but now his castle is being sucked into limbo.
Oh.
So he walks away.
Just when I thought the movie couldn't get better. That to me, that's in my that's canon right now. Like that's
so he
what
walks
happened.
away. So Dracula.
I'm so happy.
That's how they blew it. So Dracula has been walking around for 99.9 years, waiting for this moment. Then we get in his way.
I love it.
He's got to wait. And so this is why I always like to think that Duncan's Dracula is so pissed.
Yeah.
In our movie, he's so pissed.
He's a great Dracula.
He's a great Dracula. But he's so pissed. Like, he's like, okay, I asked you to do a job. You screwed it up. I asked you to do it. You screwed it. Like, no one can kill these kids. I'm going to do it. I'm going to dynamite. I'm going to blow these kids up. I ripped the door off my own car. That's my favorite shot in the movie. And because he's so pissed. Because he's waited 9. He can't do anything for 9. And this is his moment. And we're in his way. I love it. I love it.
That's awesome.
Since Josh asked about other stories, what was Dracula doing for those 99 years?
Right.
I want to see that series.
Yeah.
Or I kind of want to see the series of like, okay, how did he develop the relationship with Gilman, and what's the backstory with him and Frank? because he's like,
that
hey, old
happens in
friend.
those 99 years, Jeff.
Yeah, I'm like, I want to see the backstory.
And other things, like what was Dracula involved in? You could, DC started doing this a little bit with historical context, like with Wonder Woman and things like that, that
True.
these malevolent entities with supernatural powers are part of all the bad shit that goes on in the world. We did it, with Wonder Woman through Greek mythology. Ares, god of war, that's why World War I happens. I like to think that Dracula's been almost kind of Forrest Gumping himself, around and, involved in all of this stuff.
Yeah.
And
I think we just turn it over to Tarantino and just see what he does with it.
Oh no. Well, there'd be a bunch of like women in the 30s wearing no shoes, apparently. Like, I guess that's what it would be. So it's I don't know, but that would be cool. It would be a long, slow burn, and I like to think it as each season would be like a decade of time, and so that or maybe 2 decades, but then you have to go for 10 seasons. That's a lot of content. But like, and that idea started with me. Everybody asked, like, where does he get dynamite? And I was like, well, that bag of dynamite was like this really cool, like suede leather bag that is not new.
All
and
that stuff looked so. Oh, that's a great
fantastic.
one.
And I'm like, you know what? Maybe Dracula got that dynamite when he was hanging around while they were building the Panama Canal, and like swiped some dynamite. Like, he can get dynamite wherever he wants to. He's been everywhere. He's been walking around
it's
for
definitely from
years.
a mine. It's definitely from a mine.
It's from a mine, like maybe the gold rush. Maybe he got it,
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Like,
maybe they were building Hoover Dam with it, like Panama Canal, like the Suez Canal. Like, I don't know. He just keeps getting dynamite from all these big, engineering works projects. So
that was a weird choice, like dynamite. Like,
it's great. I love it. It's classic.
It looks, it works for so many reasons. But I'm like, that's a great question, because I'm like, at what point was like somebody like, well, I see Dracula, I see dynamite. You're like, what?
Yeah,
but it works.
Which we don't really see dynamite with Dracula in most other Dracula movies, right? We just see him kind of being like cool and romantic with the ladies and biting them. Like, he's blowing kids up in this one. It's like it's a completely different.
The treehouse scene is one of my favorites. Just because of that, like, he didn't know that they weren't.
Blew that thing up. I mean, that wasn't effect. They actually exploded the treehouse that they built. So.
Gosh,
it's fantastic. But it's also, man, that was such a badass treehouse.
Yeah, I can't even talk about it. As someone that I had woods near me, but I never got that treehouse. I couldn't be more jealous than of Sean at that point. I was like, all I want to do is get in this treehouse. Like, all I want to do is me and Sean, we're going to go to treehouse. We're going to drink one of Rudy's beers. We're going to fight a monster.
That's right.
I'm not going to lie. At that point, I probably would have looked through the camera. I apologize. I wouldn't do it now.
We all would.
Then I would have looked through the camera. Like, I was in.
Yeah.
I was in.
Hey, I'm a media timeout for 5 seconds. I got to quiet this dog down. Hold on 1 second. Be right back.
Oh, you're good. Nothing like being a podcaster.
Yeah,
that's crazy. Like, that's funny though. Like, unless you're in that world, you don't have these stories about Hollywood. Like, I'll never know what it's like to grow up on a backdrop in Hollywood.
Yeah, so the treehouse. I mean, who wouldn't want that? Like, I was sad that they blew it up, because I like, can I hang out in that? But it's like, that whole area is north of LA, and it's all now big subdivisions and grocery stores. It used to be a little bit of wilderness.
Of course. All right, Josh, what do you got for us next, buddy?
No, I was gonna let Andre. What's next? What are you working on now?
Well, right now it's really, we had such a weird kind of release and distribution prior with the documentary, which was actually got released in 2020, after some fits and starts and some delays and some contractual stuff that kind of got hosed, or we kind of got hosed. That's a whole other podcast. And so, Wolfman's Got Nards got released late and under different circumstances than we were anticipating. And so I'm still, and then COVID, it was in the middle of COVID times. You may have heard of it. And so, I kind of had to really concentrate on that while everything else shut down, in entertainment and in the event world and anything else that we all did. And so, for the last year and a half, I've really been, promoting the doc. It's released domestically in Canada and the US. And it's now actually getting its international releases this year, which is 2 years later, in Germany and France and Spain and the UK and Australia and New Zealand and hopefully Latin America. I just haven't got the update. So it's really, really the doc, even though it's kind of old, is still the current thing that, you kind of got to push a little bit. So, and a lot of people don't know it's there, and a lot of people are like, oh, I've seen it 3 times. I'm like, oh,
it's an amazing documentary. Yeah. Everybody, this isn't hyperbole. Wolfman's Got Nards is one of the best documentaries about a great movie, that I've ever watched. And I'm being 100% honest. I was texting Josh the other night. I'm like, dude, I'm so happy, but I'm also in tears. I'm going through so many emotions. It's unbelievable. If you're a fan of the movie, and I recommend a double feature. Watch the movie, watch the doc.
That happens a lot.
It's just, it's incredible. And also just the technical side of it, the way you put it together. I'm a huge documentary fan. I just really enjoyed that side of it. The way you edited it, the way you told the story. It's an amazing piece of art.
Well, I certainly appreciate that. I will take all of that and then say I did not make that movie alone. And all the things that you mentioned that are so wonderful in this documentary have nothing to do with me. It's all led by my small but awesome production team from Pilgrim Media Group, led by my man Henry McComas, and followed Wes Caldwell and Aaron Kunkel and Shane Patterson. And then a handful of other people. That's really the only people that touched this movie, and Henry touched it the most because this was my squad for a year. We were on the road. We traveled all over the place. We traveled internationally. We went on 2 different tours. Where it's just insane. And we shot a massive amount of footage in 10 months. And we were editing this. I wasn't. Wes and Henry. We were editing this movie as we were shooting it. And it kept changing and changing. And there's some stuff that we thought was fundamental in the beginning that's not even in it anymore because it kept changing and growing and evolving. And the look and the feel and what we end up doing and the story that's actually crafted, because there's actually a story in this documentary. It's not just a school and information thing.
Right.
Is just really deftly done by Henry. And, with some input, from other people, but I was just, my part had kind of been done, by the time we were actually crafting the final touches of this thing. And, but, to have your name as the director on something that people really, really like, that's, and I look, I was a big part of this. Don't get me wrong. It's my movie.
We know,
but
we know.
It's Henry and it's Wes and Shane and Aaron and the crew at Pilgrim. That just put so much awesome work into it. And it was their job, but they never felt, they say this was never like a job to them. This was something they really wanted to do. And they treated it as it was their own project. And because they were all fans, they're all filmmakers, they're all fans. They all were connected to Monster Squad in that way, especially Henry, especially Wes. And that comes across. And, nobody touched this movie or nobody's involved in this movie that isn't connected to it in some way, shape, or form. From the DP, editor, colorist, Henry, co-producer, or, like Wes, they're all fans. They all grew up. This movie is one of the things they inspired them to be filmmakers themselves, all the way to the score. Like we've got some cool music in there. And what a lot of people don't know is a lot of the kind of haunting melodies and instrumentals and some of the upbeat type stuff is I just blanked on his name, is a fan we met on the road doing the 30th anniversary Alamo tour. And he said, I'm a composer. I make music and I've always wanted to make stuff for movies and TV shows. Oh. And I said, I'd love to hear some of your stuff. That sounds great.
So
Can you email me like a track? And he emailed me 3 tracks. And the first 2 were fun and, kind of campy, kind of monster mashy, lead, like girl vocal type stuff. It was kind of neat. And this 3rd track was just amazing. And we were in minivans driving like from Kansas to the airport or something. And I said, Henry, you got to call this guy and get this song we got to use it. And then he was blown away and then said, do you need anything else? And Henry's like, what you got? He's like, he just kept making music. So that was an amazing part. I think his name was Jeff, not Jeff. I'll think of it in a minute. And then the other, there's some vocals and some cool rock sounds to it. That's all Ryan Lambert's bands.
Oh, wow.
And so, nothing touches this movie that isn't part of the family.
And
whether you're a family or a cast member and everything in between. And I think that's what lends to what you were talking about, Jeff, is, what end up the final product that people get to see in this is because of that. And I couldn't be more pleased with how it turned out. The only thing I have no regrets. There's just things that you wish you could have had. And it's just mainly kind of maybe interviews of people that timing didn't work out. And, that you would really love to have their faces in your documentary. Just in general, just because of who they are. And then a lot of times you find out that these huge names and faces are huge Monster Squad fans after you've made the movie. You're like, well, shit, why didn't you tell me this before? I want to put you in it. But it was certainly a great thing. But, Josh, I'm still talking about the doc. It's still out there for VOD and digital download. It's out. It's playing a couple places for free, like on Tubi, so it's streaming. It has ads on Plex and Tubi, which totally up to you. Still watch it, still enjoy it. I like it without the ad breaks, just because we actually have a tone and a story and a pacing, and that sort of disrupts it a little bit because it just kind of jumps in and out. When you go to all of a sudden it's like a gum commercial or something. Like, wait.
Yeah.
But then other things I've been coming out of. This last year, last summer, everybody started kind of coming out of their caves and doing things. And I was like, yes, good. We're back. Like, let's get with it. And I had two things lined up last summer. One was working production on a film in Albuquerque with one of my long-term friends, Nancy Leopardi, who's a big producer now. And I was going to help work production on a feature she was working on. And in July of last year, I was supposed to be the lead in a feature that was shooting in Texas with a friend of mine named Derek Johnson and producer Chris May, who their documentary, they've made like 3 or 4 really awesome documentaries. And one of them was The King of the Underdogs, which is about John G. Avildsen, the director. And if anybody likes 80s movies, you should watch this documentary. And because it's about this prolific director that you don't realize made all of these movies that some of your favorites. Like, Josh, who directed Rocky? John G. Avildsen. Who directed The Karate Kid? John G. Avildsen.
Yeah.
Who directed The Power of What? John G. Avildsen. So it's all these things. It's this great documentary about the history of this director that no one really knows. And I love these guys, Chris and Derek. And Derek had gone out and written the screenplay and was like, hey, man, I got to make a project right now. Are you in? And I said, what is it? He's like, I haven't written it yet, but are you in? I was like, I'm in. And so he's like, all right, wrote it. He wrote it, sent it to me. I was like, I love it. So I started getting in shape a little bit for it. And we were supposed to start in like the second week in July of last year. And as some of you may or may not know, the first weekend in July, I went down with a massive heart attack. So
I hated this part of the story.
Yeah, that put the kibosh on being in Derek's movie and working on that other movie in the next month, and it kind of canceled everything else that you had planned. Going forward a little bit. So last year was sort of a wash. I was going through some other kind of, domestic, personal stuff on top of, in addition to the heart attack and heart attack aftermath. And that was just a weird kind of weekend. So it kind of changed a lot of things.
That's one way to put it.
Yeah.
That is a upbeat way to put it.
Yeah, it was a very interesting
weird.
/ surreal experience after the fact. And I'm glad I can talk about it or not make sense of it or can make sense of it. Because the alternative is I'm not hanging out with you guys today, because it was that was certainly an option of outcome on Saturday morning, July the 3rd last year. And 5 or 6 things lined up in my favor that gave me those that who I was with, where I was, where I got to, and I got to the people I needed to be with in the facility I needed to be with, in the small window of time that I needed to be there, all due to my friend Mike, who I was with at the moment. And once we realized something was wrong, which was after a few minutes, like we didn't like, I went a little too long, like, just saying I'm dehydrated. And then I realized something was wrong, and Mike realized, like, we got to get out of here. Let's go. And he got me where I needed to be. And I had a few, with a window of about 10 minutes to spare, I think. So it could have been a completely different outcome. It was a massive amount of experience in a very short amount of time. And I think it was so fast, so much going on. All from when I just hit a great backhand volley, and because I was playing tennis, and I was like, oh, that was a good one. Then I went, oh, I feel weird. And from that moment until I was in the ICU, after being saved in the cath lab and 2 emergency rooms, was all less than an hour.
Oh my goodness!
Wow.
And it was absolutely just hyperspeed. And I was there, conscious, talking, present, trying to keep my cool, trying to keep my shit together as best I could when I knew this was not good. And
Wow.
I just tried to stay, really focused and present and not freak out, and let the people that know what they were doing do what they do. And that's what got me here. So certainly thankful for that. So, what's next? I had a year of figuring that out, figuring out where, like I said, I went through some other kind of personal relationship stuff over the year. That is all that, that year is done. So like about a month ago, that whole year, that chapter closed. And so now we're going forward. Everybody's in great shape, physically wise, emotionally wise, mentally wise. And the world's wide open right now. So that's an interesting spot to be in. Coming out of COVID times, that everybody had a rough time. And then I had an extra year of weirdness. And so now, but like I said, that chapter's, turn the page, and everything's open. And I'm, right now it's amazing because I'm starting to fill my days. Now, I went on some parents and stuff. I did some conventions this year. I went on the road for 6 weeks, 2.5 months after I got out of the hospital. So I even went to England to do a big convention with Ryan, and ended up in London and New York and Philadelphia and Louisville and all these other places, all within the same couple of weeks. And that was probably a little soon. It's probably
maybe
a little
a
soon.
touch.
They usually say rest for about 6 months. And I was like, it's been 2.5. Let's go. And I don't know. Got to get back out there and make it happen. And I'm in good shape physically, I think.
That's important. That's
doctors say
it
is. I'm still on a couple of meds. I can technically stop one. Once you reach the year mark, you reach the 12-month mark with heart attacks, and that's really kind of the big milestone. Statistical wise, apparently, because if you can make it from a massive cardiac incident like I had, and then you can make it with no other incidents of any kind for a year, the stats for the next 20, 30 years are much better in your favor. If you start having issues within that time frame, it's not so bueno. But so right now, I'm not overconfident. You still gotta be healthy and take care of yourself and listen to yourself. And get checked and make sure everything looks good. And it does. And so now I get to do some cool stuff. So I get to go to, I'm waiting. Hopefully these guys call me back. I've been asked, I'm doing a small film in Ohio in the 1st of September. They just announced that. Hopefully we get to announce I'm doing a day or two on this other little crazy project in the Dallas area. we're working on the scheduling because I've got to weave it into August and September because I'm busy right now. I'm getting busy again.
That's
and,
awesome.
We've got a big appearance in West Virginia. Actually, on the technical anniversary date, there's a cool historical theater in St. Albans, West Virginia, that is doing a screening of Monster Squad, and bringing Ryan Lambert and myself in for 2 days. And then we got some other couple things. I may go down to a big film festival in Miami area, Fort Lauderdale, Miami area. And then shooting that movie. I'm doing another movie, that Dallas movie. We're just working out the timing yet, so we can't announce that yet because it's not an official. But yeah, things are starting to crank in. These are all little things, but these are the things I like to do. I'm really into. I started this just prior to COVID times. You may have heard of it. Coming out of Ryan Lambert and I did a show together called Short Ends that no one saw, but I created the show that celebrated and showcased short films and the filmmakers that make them. And I sold it to Nerdist, and we did 22 episodes on their Alpha channel, which was a subscription channel that no longer exists. So no one saw this show. And we did 22 episodes, and we showcased 81 or 82 shorts. In those 21, we interviewed dozens of filmmakers. And I was really into, I realized that I had kind of front-loaded a film career. Most actors or most people, directors or producers, they start off small and doing shorts with their, 16 millimeter or their friends for, Ryan calls them pizza and beer movies, and not meaning you watch the movie eating pizza and beers. That's the salary. Come work on this movie. I'll give you some pizza and some beer. And they start off, and then maybe they get to LA or New York or Florida, and they start making movies, and then they do TV shows, and then they do, big studio pictures. I did it in reverse. And so, I started off in giant network TV shows and movies. And I realized that not only didn't get to do that small local indie phase, so I now have the opportunity that people think it's cool if I'm involved in them. And, I get asked a lot to do a lot of really small, things. Most of the times I can't do them because I'm not allowed to, because they're not, they don't have the SAG paperwork or it just doesn't work out, or timing, or it's just not, you just shouldn't do it. And, but sometimes there's some neat stuff that you like to be involved in. And I started doing that just before COVID, and started looking into these things a little bit more and realizing that, look, my name's not going to get you $500,000 in financing by somebody. I'm just not that type of draw. But what I can do is I can, lend a name and lend a face and lend some experience, and it makes the filmmakers and the writers and directors, to them, it's an amazing opportunity and something they'll never forget. And hopefully it helps their success or their career, and maybe they get to do the next one, and maybe I get to be involved in that. So I'm back into, look, I'll do a big network show. Absolutely. No, every day I'll do it. So if, CBS wants to put me on NCIS, I'm right there.
For the next 15 years.
One of my good friends is an OG cast member on that show. We're golf buddies. I've known him for 6 or 7 years, and he's been on since season 1.
That's why it's forever.
Amazing. Yeah. Like, is this show ever going to end?
Yeah.
And for his side, I hope it doesn't. But I know he's got other stuff right when it does that's going to crank up, because when you're part of that. But for these local, local, regional, small filmmakers, even if they're in LA, and they're making small stuff, what we ran into over the years is a lot of people will not ask us to be in their movie. They don't think we'll do it. And we go to a festival and I see some cool little comedy or a horror short, or maybe just a straight genre movie that I really dig, and I meet the filmmaker, and I always joke, I'm like, dude, I really liked that was amazing. I checked my emails, maybe the audition email went into my spam folder. Did you have the right email for me? Why didn't you? What's happening, bro? And they go, oh my gosh, I would never ask you to be in my movie. And I'm like, why the hell not? We're actors. This is what we like to do. He's like, but you're in there. I was like, I don't care. That was rad. I would have loved to be even in associated with this thing. And one of my favorite experiences is a kid that I met. We're pals now, but I call him kid because he's probably like 30. And I met him at a party, and he was dressed as me for Halloween. So that was awkward for him.
Goodness.
And his name's Adam Murray, and we ended up working together at Nerdist at the same time. And he was doing a short called Joe and the Space Pirates. And I love this little short because they put a lot of work into this little kind of cool short. And he put it on his Facebook page. He's like, hey, anybody in the Burbank area tomorrow that wants to be dead alien number 3? And so I texted him. I was like, address and time. And he's like, no, dude, seriously, you don't have to do this. I was like, address and time. And he's like, no, seriously, this is stupid. You don't need to go. I said, address and time. So I showed up to this set on his thing. He's working on a sound stage, and I do 2 hours of alien makeup.
Oh my God.
For a 1 second shot.
Wow.
Because I'm dead alien. I get dropped in front of the camera, and the guy walks over me, and it's over. So I did like 2.5 hours of alien makeup to be seen for a second, and then it's like an hour taking that shit off, and that I loved it. There was no pay on that one. I was doing it for a friend, but this is why people are like, you're not going to do that. I was like, I absolutely did that, and I loved every.
Oh, you don't have to tell us anything.
I loved all 1 second of it.
Yeah,
and
you tell me.
I love when people get to, if they have a cool script and they actually have a production and they're getting ready to shoot it, and I'm able to do it, I will look at it. I will investigate it because it's a way to, I don't want to say give back, but it's a way to give back. That sounds
absolutely is.
To me. I don't want to have to give back. I just want to do, it's like, athletes, they make $250 million for playing third base and like, oh, I'm giving back to my neighborhood. It's like, actually, you're not. Because if you did, you would have taken 25 million and given the other 200 to your neighborhood.
Fair enough.
That's
Fair
giving
enough.
back.
Yeah.
But making a little foundation and buying some kids some T-shirts, in your neighborhood ain't giving back. But I don't know. This is I can't do much. This is what I can do, and it's fun. And if it makes someone's day, then it makes someone's day. And I started doing that back in the 2000s. Like I did a great anthology film called Vault of Darkness, which is drastically local and campy and fun. And I did a vignette in that, and I'm friends with all the people that made that to this day. And the reason I did that is because this kid named Adam Hewlin, who's directed a couple things, was doing this vignette. And I was in North Carolina at the time, and they're local, and said, hey, we're doing this thing. Would you want to do it? I said, absolutely. Make sure the paperwork, I can do it. I'm allowed to do it. And I don't get you or me in trouble. And did this little vignette and this little anthology film, which ended up getting released on Amazon 2 years ago, which is crazy.
Oh, wow.
And
we're breaking up.
I was wondering.
Oh, not now.
He's actually just that good of an actor. He just decided.
Yeah, he's pausing right now. So while we've got a second, Andre's signal has crossed a little bit here. I want to encourage everybody, go watch the documentary that he made. It really is fantastic. Watch the movie, even if you've not seen Monster Squad. Watch it for the first time. Watch the documentary to match up. It's an unbelievable movie, unbelievable documentary. We've lost Andre for temporarily. Hopefully he'll log back in. We can tell him thank you. Josh G, I want to take a chance to, like, you've made a person's childhood dream come true today. If you would have told me 35 years ago that I've got the chance to talk to the star of Monster Squad, it doesn't make any sense. I do these podcasts for these small moments. I know you've interviewed several, people in the business and stuff. I don't, sports is my thing. But it's been absolutely awesome, man.
Yeah, and I appreciate you for putting this all together, technically wise, the great background wise, getting it out there to people wise, because that's not my forte. So
Yeah, no, it's been great, man. Hopefully Andre can come back on so we can tell him thank you. It really is a big thing because this is what he does. He's got a passion. I mean, he's like I can't explain enough to people. This documentary isn't something that you go watch and you're like, oh, it looks like somebody like scraped it together. This is
Right.
really, it's beautiful. It's well put together. It's a great story. It's a movie. It's like watching a movie. Like he tells a story through it. And for him to donate his time to a couple of, underground podcasters like us it was really, really generous of him and awesome of him to do that for us.
A generous amount of time.
Yeah.
Wow. It's been amazing.
Yeah. There's no way I'm going to cut off the chance to talk to a guy like this that is willing to do this. He's going to tell us stories about a life that I it doesn't make any sense to me. Like I can never, I can't visualize, how he grew up or any of that. His character Sean from the Monster Squad, which is why all this started. That's who I identify with. I don't know I would have no idea what it's like to be an actor in Hollywood through, all of those years. So for him to share those stories, it was just unbelievable, man. That was super cool for all the Monster Squad fans out there. You're going to love this. It only adds to the mystique of the show. Josh, came along afterwards, but still loves the movie. I was there from almost day one. I love the movie. You can hear it, when we talk about it. You can hear how much Andre, loves it and how much it meant to him. And it's such a huge part of his life, but not the only part of his life. So that was really cool, man.
Yeah, it absolutely was. And just anybody interested, I just want you to know this is not just a standard making of documentary. If you go in for that, you will be disappointed because I've seen some negative comments about it. I'm like, you're missing the point of what this is.
Yeah, it's better than that. It is
exactly.
It's yeah, I don't know how else to explain it. It's for like the fans of the movie. Yep. It tells the story of it. It doesn't matter, how many people saw it, how much money it made. It tells a story of the people who love something. And it doesn't matter how many, Josh, you're a horror guy. Like the horror movies they're not Marvel films. They don't make $300 million in 2 weeks, but that doesn't mean that the people who love them don't love them just as much or that they're not just as good at movies. And that's how Monster Squad fans feel about Monster Squad.
That's right. I mean, look.
Oh, it's great. It's great.
Oh no, it gets better because I didn't find a way to do this.
Oh my goodness. Josh had all the stops. Again, we'll contact. Well, it doesn't look like Andre is going to come back in. Might be. Oh my goodness. Andre, obviously he got cut off or whatever. Josh will get a hold of him. I'll get a hold of him. We'll thank him. I thanked him before the show started. I always do, just in case something like this happens. But just everybody know this was all. And and for you podcasters out there who are listening, Andre did not charge us for this. He did not hold us ransom for this. No. This was a genuine interview. A really, really great person. Before the show started, he was just as nice. This was not a business thing. We are not going to get Andre over the top. He generated, donated his time to us, and I can't appreciate it enough. And I will definitely reach out to him, and I would encourage everybody to support him in any way facet that you can, because this is what the movie making and this is what fans service should really all be about.
Right. And for any podcasters out there that are curious, don't be afraid to reach out. Just do it.
I would have never believed this, Josh, until you asked me. I still really can't believe it.
I did something similar 2 years ago with the cast from Troll 2. I got David Howard Thornton from Terrifier last year. Just reach out. I mean, you're going to get turned down. You're going to get ignored. A lot of times it just never, and I'm not saying they ignore it. They just don't see it.
It doesn't mean that they're bad people or whatever.
No, I think sometimes it's just hard for them to see it all, because they probably get a lot.
Yeah. But
just reach out, because every now and then you're going to get someone that says yes. And when you get something like this, it's all worth it.
It's just unbelievable. I really think that I'll talk to Andre again. I hope that I hope that I can, maybe I might do a sports show with him. I don't know.
There you go. Get him on there in basketball season. Oh my goodness.
It's so funny how connected our generation is, and it was a lot of fun to do that. So, Josh, what do you want to finish with, buddy, before we get out of here?
Yeah, no, I think, like I said, I'll get in contact with him, and you should too, because he'll definitely respond to you. But this was great. We had a lot of fun. Go check out Jeff Needs Sports.
Oh, wait, Andre's back to say goodbye.
Oh, is he? He made it back. All right, we stalled long enough, Jeff.
That is awesome.
I don't know what happened there, but I ended up switching laptops, which is the only thing that saved it. So it took me a few minutes.
It's funny. We were just saying like how much, like, we basically just gushed about how kind you were to do this and how great your documentary was and giving our goodbyes. So I'm so glad that you made it back in time.
Let's wrap this up then. I'm sure they were like, StreamYard was like, cut this dude off.
Yeah, well, it happens from time to time. I'm a little embarrassed that it happened today, but I don't think I control the infrastructure, but I will take full blame.
No, that's fine. I had a blast. I'm glad I got to, come in and hang out with you guys, and hopefully all your kind of followers and listeners, enjoyed the ramblings, but
none of it was rambling.
That's what you get.
Yeah. No. It was, that's what we were saying to our listeners and our viewers, is that we got to talk about and see a side of the world, honestly, that we will never be a part of. Like, I'm never going to be a child actor in Hollywood. So these are things that like only right. We just want to say thanks for donating your time. Thanks for talking basketball with me for a little while.
We got to come on and talk more than either on the air or off the air. You let me know. So it's
absolutely. I mean that. I told that to our listeners off the air. So I just want to say Josh, a huge thank. Sorry. Go. I just want to say a huge thank for, like, if you'd have told me 35 years ago that this would happen, I wouldn't have believed it. I can't say more than thanks, but I know that from you doing this for all these years, you get how much it means to someone like me. So I appreciate it, Andre.
And I appreciate it. And if you had told me 35 years ago, I wouldn't have believed it either. So it's cool that we are, getting to talk about it and connect over, cool technology. And Josh, when I missed you in Greenville. I was just there, but I didn't know. Next time we'll go. I'm an iced tea fiend, so we'll go have an iced tea. And Jeff,
best in the South.
You are where right now? I don't think I asked earlier. Where you are? Where? Jeff?
Jeff's in Ohio.
I'm sorry. I'm in Ohio.
He's in Ohio.
You're still in Ohio. Okay.
Yeah, well, I'm still in Central Nashport, Ohio.
Okay. I will
just east of Columbus.
Just east of Columbus. Got it. I will be in northwestish Ohio, I believe, in the beginning of September. But email me. Like, let's talk sports if I can remember anything. And it was so long ago. We can talk golf. It'll be you, me, my pleasure. And one other listener that forgot to hit off. But we'll get together. Stay in touch. I hope all your followers, your peoples, your peeps, your squad was all enjoyed this.
This is gonna.
It's good stories and good fun. And Jeff and Josh are in the goddamn club.
Oh, holy shit! I'm out. That's the snippet for the rest of I may retire from podcasting tonight. You don't understand. I'm going to be at a bar tonight bragging to somebody about what I just did. And they're going to be like, what the fuck are you talking about? And I'm going to be like, I'm in the goddamn club, aren't I?
That's right. There you go. That's it.
Man, that's awesome, man. Sometimes, you know what? You talked about a lot. Sometimes it's all about timing. I thank Josh so much for inviting me to do this. And I appreciate that, Josh, I was the first one that you thought of as soon as you thought of this. Cause I'm like, I did not shortchange you on how much I love this movie.
Nope. One of our first conversations was I could talk 3 hours about Monster Squad.
And we just did. And
we've done it.
And I said it before you came back, Andre, and I want to say it again. Everybody, at least once a year, I love this as a Halloween type movie, but whenever you choose, watch the movie, watch the documentary back to back. It's one of the best 3 hours ish that of your life. It's awesome.
Well, I appreciate it. Yeah. Enjoy the movie. It keeps giving, enjoy the doc if you can. That's, that's why we made it. and it's I do think it's still fun to watch and introduce other people to it, and it's just fun to keep getting out there and talking about it, and then talking about other things. We get to talk about new stuff too. So it's a platform and a door opener, and
absolutely,
you get to meet cool people, and now we hang out, so it's good.
Yeah,
hell yeah.
And Andre, I want to thank you personally. This was awesome. Appreciate you being so giving of your time.
Yeah, man. No, I appreciate it. I'm glad it worked out. I know we've been working on it for a while, and it's
I've done this before. I know it takes time.
Yeah,
it means a lot as a podcast
traveling. So
it means a lot as a podcaster too, though, because the underground guys like us, I won't say we get stood up a lot, but things get canceled a lot. People move on a lot. For you to be such a professional and to treat us, with that respect, it means a ton. It really does.
Well, I appreciate that, and it means just as much to me and us to get asked, to talk about us and our stuff. So it's always fun to make the best out of it, and I get a kick out of it. So this won't be the last time. It was the first time, but it won't be the last time. And we'll get together, and
can't wait.
Everybody out there, take care of yourself. Go get checked up. If you think you have issues, go get them checked. My motto since last year is you'd rather be wrong than too late. Just take care of yourselves. And if you can do one thing, you don't have to have wholesale changes. It's very hard to do that as humans, but it's all life is about stacking little wins and little improvements. And if you can just pick one thing and make a little improvement, then it's easier to make the next one. And maybe pick what yours is and do that. That's your summer homework.
Absolutely. Great advice. Great advice.
Yep.
All right, guys. I appreciate it. Can't wait till the next time.
Absolutely. Have a good one, man.
All right, guys.
Thanks so much.
Thank you again.
All right, Josh. Again, thank you. That was a great ending. Thanks for Andre for coming on. Thanks for Andre for coming back.
Yep.
Everybody, every single person needs to subscribe to Your Next Favorite Movie podcast. You will not be disappointed. There's some wonderful shows on there. You can binge them. That's a great thing. I'm a sports guy. Nobody's going to go back and listen to my highlights of Game 3 of the NBA Finals, but Josh's, you can download, you can binge, you can make a road trip of it. So I encourage everybody to go do that. Absolutely one of the best in the business.
Well, I appreciate that, Jeff. There's nothing I can really say to that. But if you do like sports, definitely check out Jeff Needs Sports. He is on top of it. He's basically helped create this Off the Ball network. So
absolutely,
check them all out. They all do a great job at what they do. And let's get more Jeff Needs Help out there. How about that?
Hey, I'm inspired today, man. We're working on it. So on that note, Josh, are you good? I'm good.
I'm good, man.
All right. Goodbye and have a great day, everyone.